and restrictions on that. So this is our number one priority. The strategic plans, kind of where we haven't done much for a few years, we're starting all over pretty much. Plus, we've got some issues to deal with that we've never really incorporated into a strategic plan. So as we went through and met with the department heads this year, we tried to deal with both, and they will express some of these things to you tonight. But the strategic planning, the bulk of that will be a different meeting. So I wouldn't expect huge things tonight. I mean, like I said, there's some crossovers, but we're still setting that up. After meeting with the department heads, and each one of them have listed concerns and things like that, we're still going to have to sit down and strategize and start making goals and plans and things like that. And it's a slow, ongoing process. But hopefully by this fall, we'll have something, a pretty good idea of where we're going with that, and we can start putting some things down on paper. So don't expect to hear a lot about strategic planning tonight. This is going to be a budget meeting, plain and simple. Okay. The first thing I was going to talk about before Cody gets going on all his stuff is this employee survey. I don't know how many of you had the chance to look at that. This is something that Stacy traditionally has done on occasions, just to kind of get some feedback from the employees to see where they're at. And she did this, it's been a few months now, but when I saw that, I thought this would be something good for the council to see. I think it's important for them to see what our employees are telling us. And so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. There's a number of things towards the end that I think are, because some of these things are more informative for her when you're talking about insurance and benefits and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, we can ask some general questions that would be important to you, but the specific things apply more to HR. If you look on page 1, you don't need to go to that, Cody, but just this went to every city employee, and we had an 83.3% response on that. So that's awfully high. You don't normally get those on those kind of things. So I thought that was kind of a big deal and wanted to point that out. How many people actually did respond back to us. And again, most of those first ones are more important to Stacy. But let's jump to, and I don't know what page they are. I don't have this page numbered, but it's number 18, and I'll just cover a couple of these quickly. Because I think what you're going to see tonight as we go through and you hear from the department heads, they're going to be telling you the same stuff that our employees are telling us. And as I read through this thing, and that's why I thought that was important, and then we met with the department heads, we're hearing the same story from both sides there. And so I think it's important. But in item number 18, what do you value as part of an employee experience? And you'll see the three highest things right there. This was a little bit surprising, but the highest one there was retirement and savings plan, and then compensation, and then the culture at the city. The compensation and the culture was the ones I expected. I didn't expect so much the retirement and savings. It makes sense. I just didn't expect that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But all three of those were fairly high. And we see over and over and over again, a lot of these questions, you're going to see the compensation and culture is a big deal to the employees. Number 20, what is the main reason you came to work at this organization? Again, if we pull out the two highest ones, we've got compensation is number 1, obviously, 39%, and then the next highest is the type of work / projects, and that's at 17.1, almost half of what that first one was. Switching over to number 21, if you choose to leave this organization, what would be your main reason for leaving? Again, compensation. And number 2 is the culture. You know, Riverdale's always taken that pride that we get along well. We really do, and we hire for fit. And I think that's why that's become such a big deal, and I think we take pride in it because of that. But you will consistently see through any of these questions that we ask that compensation is an important factor, and probably more so this year than it's ever been since I've been here. It's just come into play with public safety and even public works. I mean, this is just beating our door down right now, and we're trying to come up with creative ways to keep that going without just killing us overall. Number 22, why did you choose this as your main reason for leaving? I'm assuming that was a random survey, but she put every response in there, and you can go through there. There's all kinds of things you see, but again, you'll see pay and culture as being main reasons. Number 25, what's missing or disappointing? Again, we only had 3 responses there. I'm not sure why. Or was that 45 of that same one, Cody? You know?
I'm not sure. I think it is a combination.
But again, you'll see, and this is some of the stuff you'll hear tonight. Like that number one there is the one that we've heard consistently from department heads, is that we are understaffed, and all of us are wearing new hats, and even tonight, I'm going to give a brief presentation on the court. But since I've been appointed as the city administrator, we've even shifted some of that stuff onto Cody. So we're kind of splitting that department there, just because I was trying to free up some time for me to cover some of the other stuff. And again, Cody's never been involved in the court, but he is now, whether he wanted to or not. So we're seeing so many people wearing so many different hats. Rich is going to talk about some recent changes that we've had to do simply because of our situation here, and we just don't have other people to turn to. So I don't know that I'll go into any more detail on that, but it'd be a good thing for you to read, just so you can kind of see what our employees are telling us. This is the stuff we're hearing every day. So when people are coming or leaving, we're dealing with these things as department heads or administration consistently. It's a concern, and so we are wanting to bring that up to you. Now, as we go through this tonight, I'll just bring this up now. We did put a discussion topic there on ARPA because the mayor wanted to discuss that a little bit. We had a little bit of a scare this week on ARPA. We had to file some reports last week by that Saturday, and we couldn't get into it. And it was a nightmare because if those weren't filed, we risked losing our ARPA funds. But thanks to Stacy and Cody, they knocked down some doors. Cody actually got into it through a back door, through his Far West connections out there, and we were able to get in and file those reports. But we will discuss that a little bit tonight, just to give you some updates on that. Some of the RDA funding that's listed, the very last item, will come up in Rich's presentation. Actually, tonight will be a two-part thing. One, he will deal with these rec stuff, and two, he will deal with the senior facility. And so some of those RDA funds come up in that as part of that discussion, but we can go into greater detail later on. And then property tax discussion, again, this comes into play because at the end of this is one of the things that we think is important to bring it up and discuss it and why we think that's important. And we can get into more detail on that. But as I mentioned before, and this will be the segue into these other ones, so at least from my perspective as far as the court and the legal thing, and just to explain to you what we did and how we did it. As we met with each of the department heads, Cody was kind enough to give me some money to buy calendars for everybody. I know that was a big stretch, but he was nice enough to do it. So as we came in, we did this with everybody. We still got to finish Sean's. We got interrupted that day on his, wasn't able to finish it. But with each one of these, what I asked him to do, and to look at this in advance, is to, thank you, so that everybody can hear it. And like I said, this part here is the part that is most important to me as we look forward to getting into that strategic planning. So we got to look and see what are your concerns, both at, so you can see this is current year. So as we did these, and they'll make their presentations tonight that will deal primarily with this, but they could trickle into these things too. But so we discussed, and this is the stuff we used for this year's budget and our projections and things like that. So as we went through that, we discussed these things. So what are your concerns? What do we need to do? And that's where they listed all those things for the current year. And then I also asked them to project out. So tell me, because I can't sit here and look at Shawley's budget or Mike's or anybody else's and pretend like I know what they're even looking at or what they're facing. So we had them tell us, what are your concerns for these 5 years? And then project it out. And we listed a 10-year, but in reality, it's probably more of an 8-year because that's when we hit the budget crunch right there. And so we discussed those things and what are our concerns. And so we will take those and incorporate, we'll combine them all together. And there will also be some overall things that involves all departments. So this is the stuff that we will use, like I said, to do our strategic planning, but we won't get into as much detail on these things tonight as we will up here. And so that's where they'll base most of their stuff on, but it will try to touch in here because they carry over. I mean, if you look just for examples here, I mean, obviously in the court, I'm dealing with this. We've just hired 2 new clerks this year, and we had to go through that whole process, and we took one from, where was she from? Pleasant View? I think it's Pleasant. Harrisville, that's right. So those were wages and issues that we had to negotiate with her to try and pull her away. And then the other one was actually one that we stole from upstairs and brought her down because she had been wanting a little bit of a change. But then we had to replace her. So all these things our concerns. So even in the clerk's office, which I don't have that many over there, it's kind of a small department. I mean, we had two new clerks this year. Wages, I think, were okay, but even that, when we started negotiating those things, what we're finding is all these cities around the county are all up in their wages. And so it's taxing us even more than we've ever been. Riverdale's always been known as the one who paid the best and stuff. And our survey certainly helps, but sometimes that survey's a year behind, and a lot of times it is. And so, when we got officers that were walking out because South Ogden's paying, $5, $10 more an hour, it's tough. And we don't want to lose those guys, but there's not a lot we can do sometimes till that survey comes out. But anyway, like I said, these are all things. Oh, my public defenders and prosecutors, just to tell you, so Thursday will be our first day with the new public defender. Our last guy went down to, it was either Ogden City or Weber County for quite a bit more money, but he was only part-time for us here, so that's not a surprise. But when I tried to find a public defender, the bids I was getting was, a couple of those were like 150 to 200% higher than what we're paying right now. I don't even have that in the budget, not even close. And so these are all things we're having to face. The same thing with the prosecutors. I mean, I had no idea our two prosecutors had been paying an individual themselves out of their contract to do paperwork for them. That is our paperwork. It was stuff that Lynette used to do in her position, and then when we got rid of that and didn't replace that, it fell on the prosecutors, which was never part of their original contract. And so, I mean, these are all things that we just keep running into over and over and over again, and these are just small examples, but they're examples that even in a small department, this is what we keep bumping into. Some of the things, I mean, just looking at this, and like I said, I'm just segueing in here a little bit, but court growth, I mean, if we have a couple of these developments go in, when we have more people, we're going to have more crime, and that's just going to increase. So they'll write more tickets. We're going to have more action back here. We're going to need more people eventually. So these are things that I got to look at. Drug court's something else we got to look at. One of the things we're facing there, one is we're running out of people for drug court, not on purpose, but where we've had telephonic meetings and things like that, our drug court has really taken a big hit. And so it's one of those things you look at, do we continue doing this? It doesn't cost us a huge amount of money. You guys give them, I think, $5,000 a year just for some supplemental incomes. They pay the bulk of that, but we also pay half of a full-time salary that goes to drug court. So that's probably our biggest expense. So these are all things that we have to look at in 5-year plan. Do we continue to do that? Is that worthwhile for Riverdale City? And then going into the 10-year, same thing there. But other things come into play, like our facilities. I mean, we keep getting evaluated from the AOC every year, and they come in and walk into this, and they say, so if you have an active shooter right there in that door, who's going to get out? And this is probably one of the worst setups that I think I've ever been in, to be honest with you, because if they're sitting right at that door and they take out the bailiff, we have nobody else down here. So everybody in this room technically would probably be dead unless you can get out that door right there. So they're not happy with it. They even had us this year change one of our doors because of the glass that's on the door, because they don't want people shooting through that. So these are all factors. And I know realistically, I don't know how we can improve facilities, but these are all things that will be part of that strategic plan when we get that all put together. So just to give you guys some heads up of how we're doing that and why we're doing it, that's what we did, and that's what's getting us started. Any questions on any of that before we move on? And they're not going to go in these. I didn't have them bring those calendars or anything, but they have those. We'll go back over it next year. We'll review some of this stuff, see where we're getting, and see where we got to make updates and things like that. And that will continue on. And that's where we'll eventually have our strategic plan in place, and that'll set our roadmap of how we're going to get to what we need to get to eventually. But that's where we're at. We're just kind of starting from new, and it's gonna take a while before we get there. So, questions? The bulk of this meeting, as it always has been, is going to be Cody's. We did set times for each of the department heads. You can see they're here. They're prepared to go. Some of them have some presentations. I think we got 2 PowerPoints. Some of the other ones submitted materials, and others are just going to make a small presentation on that. So if you don't have anything further than that, I think we'll just proceed as it's outlined, and we'll go forward. We good?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so As always, I'll probably move fairly fast. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me. Mayor asked me how we set our budgets. So you can see this is a budget worksheet that I put together in February and I give to all the department heads. And this is why my response to Councillor Hanson is largely what it is, because largely our departments are run by our department heads. And so they're the ones that know what they need and what's changing and those kind of things. So this is you guys as the mayor and council's budget sheet. And so Steve helps put this together, but I give this to each of the department heads, and then I help fill out the salaries and benefits and those kind of things because I know what's going in those and the internal service funds and the capital outlay, and then the department heads are responsible for the rest. And I put in what will fit in the budget. And so ultimately those numbers are coming from them and some from me. And if you remember, like, we are largely a service corporation. So Steve talking about wages a ton, like wages is a ton of what we do. Like there's not a department in the city that isn't a service that we're providing. And so we need people to provide that service. And so that is a huge part of our budget. So as you can see, we are about $21 million for our whole budgets for every fund. Here's the revenues for the year. We're a little higher on expenditures for some various reasons I can explain as we go. Here's the general fund in summary. So you can see overall we only went up about $101,000, and I'll go over those changes. Same thing on the expenditures. I know this is a chart that you guys like to see. And so you can see here's historical. So these are 2014 through 2021. These would be audited amounts of where we're at. And then you can see the projected is what we think we're going to hit, and then budgeted. And keep in mind, budgeted, we always try to budget worst case scenario, right? And we're not going to get everything in there, but we try to make sure that we're going to cover our expenditures. So the budget should always exceed our expenditures for the most part. So realistically, these lines, you can see the budget for a lot of them is higher than the trend of the line, but you can see in general, you can see fires trending this direction. You can see police is this direction. And you can see a huge part of that is wage increases for the police. And some of that is reality, where a lot of the other departments, you can see they're pretty flat for the most part. So we're going to start with,
what was the green one?
Which green one?
I can't.
This one right there.
Okay.
That one's Public Works. And so that one's largely dependent upon like capital projects and stuff. And so that's why that's ticking up so much on that one. So, okay, so we're going to start with revenues in the general fund. So you can see this is prior year actual for 2020, 2021. And then current year budget is 2021, 2022. This is where we're at. This is where I'm projecting we'll be at. And then this is what we're talking about, the future year budget. So for those of you who are new, or just as a refresher, the county, when they do our assessment for our property tax, they set our certified tax rate and the amount of revenue that they project that we should collect from that. So I just budget an amount and then I adjust to that. And so this will change for sure. But right now we don't have a proposed tax increase in the budget, but we are going to talk about that later. You can see our sales tax continues to grow. And so that we do have a increase there, and that's how we fund a lot of the increases in salaries and things is in that growth factor in our sales tax. I'm going to hit changes. So if anything isn't changing, then we've just are kind of assuming that it's staying status quo, and so I'm not going to talk about it unless you guys have questions. Here's our ARPA money. We really will.
Did you mention our new franchise tax?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, we do have our new franchise tax right here. We don't know how much we're getting yet because it's just barely started in April, if you remember. And so 300,000 is just like throwing a number at the wall. And so,
have you seen any of that yet?
Not yet.
None of it.
None of it, because it wouldn't have started till April, and then it takes a while for it to get remitted, and so we haven't seen any of it yet.
I have a question real quick. For example, we've got RC Willie's closing. They do 55 million in sales a year. They're one of the bigger ones. Okay, so we try to even factor what that would mean, or do we just kind of or adjust as the first, second, third quarter.
No, like we track it, and then those big ones hurt, right? And so you can see that like our actuals have been higher than what I'm budgeting. And part of the reason for that is I'm being conservative, and I know that there's stuff that's closing in the city. And some of those bigger ones like RC Willie's hurts. And that's why diversifying to like having more, you can see how, so they usually talk about it as a stool, and depending on how big the leg is, depends upon how much money we get. So you can see of these revenues right here in our tax revenues, those are our most reliable source of revenues. So we have one huge leg of the stool, and then we have like some toothpicks. And that's what we always talk to you guys about, is like diversifying our revenues, because in an economic event like happened in 2011, 2012, the only thing that saved the city was the hold harmless agreement that we had because of the property tax or the sales tax reallocations. Because if not, like our revenues would have decreased those years, but we're guaranteed an amount because of hold harmless. And that's where diversifying is huge for us. And like GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, I was reading a thing last night, and they recommend that you diversify, you take care of different pots, you have them different sizes, so that you are doing that. And you can see we are hugely reliant upon that sales tax, and that is scary.
So just want to make sure I understand this right. So you're budgeting, we're going to bring in 7.3 million.
Right.
Sales tax.
Right.
This year, it looks like we're going to bring in 8.8. So 1.5 more than what you're budgeting.
Right.
We can have money in a rainy day fund.
Right.
And is it 30% now of our budget?
Yeah.
20,
Yep.
30?
And it's our actual revenues, I believe, not our budget.
Oh, it's our revenues. We can have
Right.
30% of our revenues in a rainy day fund.
Right. And it's actually just called like our fund balance. A lot of people refer to it as a rainy day fund, but yeah, we can set that aside for a downturn. But you can see like 30%, and in reality doesn't go a whole long ways, right?
Our revenues 13 million?
Yeah, for the general fund.
And so we can have up to 30% of
the
that.
13
And we've always
million.
maxed that out.
Right.
And are we still there?
We are.
We're still there.
Yep. And then we transfer any overage beyond that amount into the capital projects fund. So, yep.
Okay.
So, any other questions?
So it's like $4 million.
Yeah.
So the sales tax will be adjusted.
Yep. Something right around there.
He's showing it.
Okay. So then we've got our ARPA money. Our ARPA money, we've already got half of it. We're going to get double this amount. We've already spent a little bit of it on some public safety stuff. But we've got about $1,025,000 sitting there. We really should spend that. A large part of what that can be spent for is infrastructure projects. So in talking to Sean, like that project that you approved a few weeks ago to do the Weber Basin connection, like that would probably qualify. And it would be good to use that money. And so in theory, we could use that money. I think it was like $450,000 or something it ended up being. We could use that money, and then that'll just come out of that ARPA money, because it's got a timeline and we need to get it spent.
May I ask a question about ARPA?
Okay.
Do you have other plans already for the ARPA money this year and next year?
Mainly just capital projects is what we were planning.
I know a lot of cities and counties have done employee incentives because of the work during COVID, but I'll just throw that out there.
Right. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And we can do that. We've got a couple ideas here that we can talk more about that ARPA as we go. So, and then you can see we got that CMAQ funding. We actually had it in the budget for the current year, but it hasn't come in yet. That's that roundabout on 1050. And then our local option money, you can see it usually trends with sales tax. So we've actually been collecting a lot of that, and so that's been really good. That helps us to do more road projects, and all the rest.
Cody,
Yep.
Can that roundabout money be redirected anyway?
If you remember, it's tied to that 1050 West project. So it's either like do the project or forego the money. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you like that roundabout or not. Our internal service fund, we'll talk about this in a minute with Rich too, but we're increasing that reimbursement. We charge, because the city provides a whole bunch of services to the senior housing facility. We mow the lawn, we plow the snow, we do the accounting, we do a ton of stuff. We charge them for some of those services that we're paying like employees in other places for, and that's what that 60,000 is. And we're increasing it because there's a change change over there. We have an employee that just quit that's been over there a long time, and so we're going to do stuff a little different, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Rich has increased some of his fees. I put this on the wrong line item. He's going to increase his basketball fees instead of baseball and softball, but he has some fee increases that he'll talk about in a minute, so just keep that in mind. We are trending a little higher on our ambulance transportation fees.
Sorry, I got a question for Rich. Like, just because that 0 was on there, so they're not doing baseball this year? Is that what I heard? Or
No, we're doing it.
because there's a 0 there.
It depends when people pay, because some of this stuff, like depending on when I pull this report, nobody may have paid yet.
Okay. Well, I heard a rumor that we weren't doing baseball because there wasn't enough signups, and so then I saw the 0 and I was like, maybe really they are.
That'd be news to me. We
Okay.
put out a schedule and we're planning on starting that.
That's good news to me that we're playing baseball. But I was just concerned. I didn't pay too much until I saw that, and I was like, oh, maybe we really aren't doing it this year. Okay.
I think it might just be a rumor.
Well, it sounds like it. He would know. But the zero on the budget, just that kind of really made me think maybe we could have that way.
And some of these, like the projected account, I can use our accounting software to forecast it, but then I have to go in and adjust them all manually if they're wrong. So I go through it like 20 times and I still miss a bunch because there's like thousands of lines that I go through. And so it's not perfect. It's just a best guess. Our interest earnings are way down, so I pulled that down. We've got some rollovers of Class C roads and local option road funding there. Our use of fund balance, I have to budget the transfer to our capital projects fund. We have to budget that or we're in non-compliance with the state auditor's office. So I basically add money to transfer so that it's just an accounting thing I have to do. Anyways.
Because that's a really concerning term, use of fund balance, right? I mean, generally.
Not really. I mean, like to people who aren't accountants, maybe, but for accountants,
It
it's
is.
like, no, because like I'm moving money. So like you can see the other thing there's ramp population grant rollover. So it's money that like is ramp grant money that we need to spend. And so I'm just adding it back into the budget because we're not going to spend it this year. So it's just an accounting jargon. So you can see in total, well, that's our total miscellaneous revenues are $2 million. So that's the general fund revenues. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the next part? No?
I
Okay.
have a question.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions this
That's
year.
fine.
I don't usually have that many, but so let's say it looks like this year we are going to collect a lot more than we budgeted, than our expenses are, like a significant amount more. So what happens to that?
We transfer it to the capital projects fund.
Which is that the same as that's
No.
different than the
Right.
than the fund balance or whatever.
Right.
We just transfer it all into there.
So it's weird because we can only have 30% in the general fund
Day,
as
yeah.
unrestricted funds.
Right.
But then we can have as much money in the capital projects fund as we want.
And we have to have placeholders for that.
No.
Is that we don't even need placeholders.
We don't even need placeholders.
Can it be
So-
moved out for? Can it be moved out for like operations if we got into a pinch?
Yeah, it can be transferred back. It just has to be approved by you guys. And so it's kind of our catch-all. And so we move that extra money over there. The problem is it's mainly sales tax, right?
Right.
And so as you guys have alluded to for several reasons, like I've read a ton of articles recently that the guy who predicted the 2020 crash is now predicting that in 2022 fourth quarter that there's going to be a huge recession and stuff. And so who knows what's going to happen in the coming year, right? And so anyways, so we try to budget conservatively, but then sometimes we end up with those. And that's where, like, if it's property tax, we know what's coming in.
Right.
But with that sales tax, we just don't know because we don't know, like, at some point, is Tony DeVino going to run out of cars? I mean, they almost have. Like, who would have ever thought, right? And so there's some weird stuff that
How much are we transferring to the capital projects this year?
I'll tell you in July or August.
Do you have an estimate? Or
I don't know because I don't know because we don't get our sales tax. So if you think about it, you go to the store today and buy something, right? So you pay sales tax. So say you go to Target, let's say somewhere funner, Sportsman's Warehouse. You go to Sportsman's Warehouse and buy some fish and stuff. You pay sales tax. So Sportsman's Warehouse, at the end of the month, they have to file a sales tax report with the state. So then they remit that sales tax to the state of Utah. And then the state of Utah has some time to remit that money to us. So it's 2 months after so like in December, we have no idea how good Christmas was. We don't know till February, like 20th, 21st, when we get our sales tax distribution, how we did on sales tax. That's the other thing that's hard with sales tax is we don't actually know how much sales tax money we're going to generate for the city until August for the fiscal year.
But you do have a projection.
I do have a projection.
Are you,
It's that 8.8 million.
For the whole
well, that's
state.
how much we're gonna collect.
Right. So if you look here at the bottom, you can see like my total revenues and my total, and that would be what I think will be over.
Okay.
So, okay. Any other questions? So far, they've been good. So, okay. So here's our summary of benefit changes. So you can see the SHA and FSA contribution limits have been updated. This is for that huge benefit package that's in the packet. I'm not going to go through it, but you guys can if you want. Overall medical premiums increased 4.8%. You can see those. Stacy did a bunch of work on stuff and looked at carriers and stuff and found some cost savings with actually better coverage for a few things. Just a couple things that were interesting when she did that. She looked at some short-term disability stuff, and we had a ton of huge companies who wouldn't bid us because we had to tell them how many full-time employees we have, and we have too many public safety employees to regular employees. Our percentage is too high and it's too risky. They wouldn't bid us. They just said, nope, we're not interested. Your percentage exceeds 20% or 30% or whatever it was, and they weren't interested. So anyways, there's our changes in summary. So as Mayor was asking me a question, so if you remember, we do a salary survey. Stacy does that in January. She goes out and we use a program called TechNet. She goes out and she pulls the jobs based upon job description. We match jobs based upon the description so that we get similar salaries. And then we build a job. We build an 18-tier step system off of that, and we update that annually. And then as long as the budget works, we give employees a step. So we usually report to you guys what the average step increase is. So for this year, it's 7.99%. Now, the vast majority of the higher increases are all public safety related and mainly police. So then we have to give the judge the average increase, and so we also include that in the budget for you guys, and then you guys can decide on that June 21st meeting if you want to take your increases or not. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. The mayor's increase currently, you can see it's $2,075 a month. It would go to $2,221. Council's $838.83, and it'd go to $905.85. So we have that 7.99% increase in the budget. Now, talking to, I pulled up a bunch of different articles to see, how much is inflation costing Utah. There's this article, I don't know if you've seen it. Utah's leading the nation in inflation right now. It's 10.4%. So if we give our employees 7.99%, inflation's 10.4%, they're actually losing buying power by several percent, right? So they're not getting really an increase, if you will. They're actually losing the ability to buy stuff. South Ogden, I was talking to their finance director last week.
This is the part where the thing comes up that says skip ads.
Right. Yeah, sorry. So South Ogden, I was talking to their finance director. They're giving a 10% cost of living adjustment to their employees, and then they're giving a merit increase. So they're doing 10.99 to 13.99. So, and then everything's been I'm going to use the word wonky the last year with people doing mid-year adjustments and stuff like that. Stacy and I months ago started thinking about, okay, what can we do? Because we know that people's got ARPA money. We know that people are doing all sorts of stuff. So what can we do to show our employees that we're appreciative and what would fit within the budget? So what we've included in the budget, and we're hoping that you'll see the value of, is we're proposing that we do a one-time COLA bonus. And so we built into the budget 4% for full-time employees and $250 for part-time employees. And we proposed that was paid out once during the year so that it's a bigger lump sum for the employees. that gets our average where we're closer to like what South Ogden is, and we're over that 10%. Hopefully that will do some goodwill with the employees too. And because we are a year behind, if you remember with our salary surveys, everybody else reports, then we pull their numbers, and then that's our wage. So we are like a year behind with that. And so we thought we don't want to do this more than just one time, but it'll kind of get us through this weird time where everybody has all this ARPA money and CARES money and things, and then give us a chance for the scales to catch up. And so once we presented it to the department heads, they all thought it was a great idea and really liked it. And so that's included in the wages throughout the various departments.
When would they receive that?
So we're thinking in July or August, and then we might tie some loopholes to it. So trying to like not only like incentivize our employees, but also hopefully some retention too.
Can you do it so each employee gets their bonus on their, like their anniversary date or something like that? When they
That would be a logistical nightmare for Stacy. And so we would rather just do it in one pay period and give it to everybody at one time. And then they're all getting it at the same time. And hopefully, because the more we talked about it, we're like, the more we put on this, like we still want it to be good. If we put too many loopholes and too many things on it, then it's going to lose some of its effectiveness. And so we're just trying to keep it fairly simple, but tie a few things to it.
Okay, real quick, just give me a quick definition of ARPA and CARES and what it can be used for. And then,
Do you have 5 hours?
Well, okay.
So like, because the rule books are like this big.
You're using the CARES,
We're not using CARES. We're only using ARPA.
only ARPA.
CARES is
Okay.
gone, but some people still have CARES money that they haven't spent.
Oh, okay, that's why you brought it up.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is off topic, but the Child Justice Center people presented.
So that blew up because they said if one city didn't do it, it was done. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody out west, like West Haven, was like, "We're not doing it. It's done." And so it's no more.
Okay, so one of the things that they pitched was you could use, was it CARES money?
ARPA.
It was ARPA.
ARPA money. Okay, never mind.
Just FYI, they are still pushing it, and they have changed it so that the county would now own it instead of the nonprofit, and people are jumping back on board. And
That makes a lot more sense. We
It-
own it in Box Elder.
It does make more sense. It's honestly, I feel like it's a good like we should spend our ARPA money as soon as possible because there's tons of people like this, and the more that, and if we just spend it on what we want to spend it on, then it's gone, and we can just tell people, sorry, we spent it, and we get way less because it's based upon population. Like Roy got like $5 million, we got like $1 million. So, like, it isn't really proportionate what CJC asked for either. Like, it's a huge chunk of ours where what they asked Roy was, like, insignificant.
So,
So-
how long is ARPA going to continue? Do we know yet?
What do you mean?
it's,
Like-
it's a one.
Was
It's-
it,
There's
you know,
two
like each
trenches.
year-
It's 2 trenches. It's got to be spent by 2025.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
So,
So even though we're doing these salary bumps, we're going to be able to sustain it with our own.
we're not using ARPA money.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
We're not using it for the COLA?
Should we?
That was confusing because
Should we?
I thought it was also.
No. We could if you guys wanted to. But I think it's cleaner because we have to do a single audit, which is a special federal audit for any expenditures over $750,000 of federal awards. So it's going to be way cleaner if we just have like 2 or 3 big infrastructure projects, and that's all our auditors have to test. So I would rather just pay for infrastructure. And like we have a lot of extra money, not like lots, but we have extra money because our employees haven't been going to trainings. They haven't been doing stuff because they couldn't during COVID. And so that's part of the way that we have this leftover money. And so we're proposing basically to use some of that for this one-time COLA. So,
One thing I would like is, I mean, those couple of comments, the employees feel like they're overworked and they're that. I know our employees do a lot of work, and I appreciate it. I mean, I really do appreciate all they do, but I still, I don't like hearing that they feel like they're overworked. So I would like a little bit of this bonus to be like, hey, it's not just cost of living. It's, look, you guys haven't gone to your training. You guys have been doing a lot of stuff, and here's a little bit of money to kind of help you with that. You've missed out on your training. That's where this is coming from. It's not, I mean, ARPA is, it's almost it's not a dirty word, but it's kind of like, hey, we got a bunch of free money here. You guys have a little bit.
Right.
No, this is money that we want to give to those guys that they didn't spend. We want to keep the culture going where when you don't spend your money here in the city, when department heads don't spend their money, when employees get by with, then they get a chance to get some of that money back.
And the one thing I would say to you guys too, like, don't tell everybody we're doing this so that it's something different.
Yeah.
So that South Ogden all of a sudden, they don't come and say, hey, we're going to do this 4% thing too.
Yeah.
Because
thanks for telling me, because I get tons of questions. I get questioned every time I run into those meetings. That's all
Right.
I want to know. What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?
And we just told everybody because this is online, so.
Right. But unless they've watched this, like,
I was gonna say, I'm
Nobody's
pretty sure
watching.
64
Lori
views
is
is
probably-
like
I think
that.
I know the one person who's watching.
We've got 64
Yeah, I do
views
too.
already.
Yeah, I know the
My
one
dad.
guy. Oh no, there's two then with Cody. With Cody. It's like,
right. So anyways, so that's what we're proposing. So if you remember any of these citywide facts as we go, are those things we just talked about, because they're going to be in every department, every fund. So what I've referred to as citywide facts are those step increases, that COLA, and the increases in the benefits. So this is you guys' department. So you can see I've got those citywide facts. We increased the public notice budget by about $1,500 just because they cost a heck of a lot more than they used to. There's no election this year. We included $2,000. Well, we adjusted this slightly, but remember we said we'd talk about a citizen survey. So I put a tiny bit of money in here if you guys decided you wanted to do that. We've got the special project budget that we carried over. This has that mayor's lunch thing in there. We just left that old note there. I don't know if you're doing something, but
we
there's a
might
little bit of
start
money
again
there.
in the fall. Yeah.
Then we also have some money, remember, if we wanted to hire like Fred Philpott or somebody to help us with some of this long-term strategic planning stuff. And so that's that $18,500. And then we have internal service fund allocations. We have an IT fund and a motor pool. And basically they lease or provide their services to the other departments, and then we charge the other departments for that. And so that's what that is. We'll go over their budget in a minute, but you can see that 1272 is that. So do you guys have any questions? Do you have any comments on the citizen survey? Are we good? Do you want me to move on? What do you want?
One down. Good
Okay.
job.
All right. Nobody said anything, so I'm going. Okay, legal. So court, you can see we have our citywide facts here. Not much changed here. One thing that we need to change, and we just found out, is the public defender. We need to increase this a little bit because the contract amount's going to go up. So that'll be a change that you see for the final budget more than likely. And then you can see the internal service fund allocation changed a little bit. And so
I had a question on this. So it looks
Okay.
it looks like we put 3,000 for a vehicle allowance, and it looks like we might have split the vehicle allowance for the city administrator and the legal. Is that how that happened?
we have a guy that we're splitting up.
We're splitting, and
So we split it between the city administration and the legal department.
yeah.
Because he's really still providing a lot of those legal services, right? And so Stacy and I looked at it and came up with a percentage allocation. I think we felt pretty good about like 50-50.
Yeah.
And so we did that. If you see, like, we'll talk about this in a second, but like within city administration, a lot of stuff stayed similar and we had a decrease here. So like if that changed, then we'd need to adjust the budget a little bit. But for the time being, we thought we should just budget what we're doing and go from there.
So we split the vehicle. I had a question on the travel and training. Do we think Steve's going to spend all that money on doing all the legal travel training and all the city administrator? Like,
Some of the training, it depends on who goes, and part of it depends on Michelle too, because depending on like the certifications and that she does, and like if she does her municipal court certification, like there's a bunch of training she has to go to at the beginning.
are you in mayor and council again now? Or
Oh,
that's
sorry,
not
I
what
went too
do,
far.
right?
Yeah, and so it just kind of depends on what's down here. You're probably referring to some of this stuff, right? And so
Yeah.
we don't know at this point, and so we just left that where it was until like he sees what trainings he likes going to and which ones he doesn't, and which ones are valuable.
Well, I
and
appreciate
stuff.
you splitting the other one. I just was curious about that if it needed to be looked at. Like, I mean, that's That's a lot of being gone. Like he probably won't be able to spend all that. I doubt that Steve could go to every conference for the city manager and for the attorney.
Right, right. And some stuff too, you got to remember, like in this is court too. So we pay for drug court trainings. We pay for all the drug court.
just Steve,
It's
the
not
whole-
just
okay.
Steve. It's everybody within either the legal or the city administration
City can
departments.
Buy a condo in St. George and save some money.
Right,
Pretty cheap.
right.
Okay.
So when what we're going to do is once I talk about the budget for a department, then we'll have the department head talk about it. So we've already talked about legal. So we'll just keep going unless you guys have any questions.
I have one. So I've been asking how the prosecutors are paid. On their contract, are they paid on an hourly basis or are they paid on?
It's just a flat fee.
And they're just employees, really. They're just part-time employees, and we pay them like a flat rate a month.
Okay.
Now, are they contract or the employees?
They're employees. They're part-time employees.
But we did do a contract with them, and they split it between the two of them equally. And it's not a whole lot more than what it was back when we had Mike Junk here. We did give him a little bit more, but it's not. We get a good deal because we go through the county basically on half of it. And Chris Allred gives us a good deal. Public defender is going to be a similar thing. They're starting a new public defender's office, and we're working out a deal with them. The thing I like the most about those is I always have coverage. I never have to worry about it. So if my prosecutor doesn't show up or my public defender doesn't show up, I don't have to cancel court. They will always make sure somebody is here. It may not be the same person. It usually is, but it's not always. And they cover for each other, so it works out really nice. We never miss court days, so that makes it convenient.
So, because I've been made aware of 2 cases that I've been following fairly closely for a couple of years, and Tish is terrible. She treats people horribly, and so I'm wondering. So she's just a flat rate. So her incompetence that I've been able to see is just her incompetence. It's she doesn't get any extra money
No, that's not.
to
That's not
run the
effective.
bill up or
No,
anything
not at
like
all.
that, 'cause
In fact,
she's
they usually-
running, she's running the 2 cases that I know. I mean, she's running their retainers from their attorneys because she doesn't know what she's talking about, and it's been really bad for just the 2 that I know about. I only know of 2.
Oh, yeah.
But if she's
No, she doesn't get
running
any
ragged
extra if
and
that
paying
goes
for
out.
her own person to
The
do
biggest
this,
thing
I
you
just don't want an increase.
No, it's not that at all. It's you got to remember these last 2 years have been really, really weird because of COVID. Every case we have has been drug on far beyond the I've ever seen a case go. Not just the ones she handles, all of them. We're not getting back to full-time court, in-person court until Thursday. That's our first day in over 2 years. So a lot of that stuff got continued over and over and over and over again. And it's not necessarily the fault of the prosecutors. The judge has been part of that too, and it's just the system. It's just weird because under the Constitution you have a right to a speedy trial, but because of COVID, man, that just went out the window. I've never seen cases
Went out the
dragged.
window? That's
What's that?
The Constitution went out the window.
Pretty much,
So the thing is, you have 2 prosecutors.
right?
I haven't heard a complaint about the one at all, and I do have an in on that group, and there's a lot of complaints about the other one, and I don't think either one of the 2 cases have gotten a fair shot, not just with the COVID, but her, just the way she rolls, just the way she interprets things and doesn't know facts, and it's been ugly. And I wouldn't say anything if it was 1, but it is 2, and they're totally separate, independent people cases. So anyway, but if she's just getting a flat fee,
Yeah, it makes no difference at all on that for her. So
Mayor, is it appropriate to talk about the character
Probably
of
not.
individuals?
No, probably need to.
I think it's great. So if you want to censure me, go ahead.
We probably should do
prefer
that in
you
like a
censor
closed
yourself.
session if we were going to discuss that. So.
Okay, so city administration. So we got the citywide facts. We have a few more employees that are acting like they're interested in the education assistance. So we increased that line item. Like I said, we left a lot of them the same just because it's new. We're seeing, and Bill did stuff a little different than Roger did, and so we're just trying to kind of see where we're headed with that one. We don't have a lot of history on
What department
that.
are we in right now?
City admin.
City admin. Okay.
And then you can see we've got the internal service fund allocations. And so that budget actually decreased slightly. just to having Steve handle some of those things too. Is there anything you want to say about city admin?
No.
Okay. So business administration, this is my department. You can see these are our citywide facts for the most part.
I'm sorry.
What?
I had a question about the wages on
Yeah.
that one. Like, that's a huge increase. Are you hiring someone or?
We have some employees who are retiring, and so we have at least one that will retire in my department in the next year, and so like having backfill and then paying that person out for their vacation and stuff, like that's the biggest change there.
That's like a 30% increase, right?
Right.
Yeah, when
So
Randy Bailey retired, it was a massive hit.
yeah, and that's usually how it goes when we have somebody retire. It's like
Right.
that, and so they just bounce up, and so that's a lot of what it is.
So, hey, one of the things that was mentioned, like when Lynette retired and she wasn't replaced, what happened to her salary?
It just get absorbs back in, and so then like in a theory it helps cover like the other increases of the employees and things like that. It just helps balance the budget because we haven't done a property tax increase for a long time or anything, and so it just helps the whole machine keep moving forward, if you will. So
So it was divided up between other employees kind of thing?
well, not so much the workload, yes, was reallocated and divided up among other employees, and then the wages themselves were
Well,
like,
it's my understanding that the workload went to other people and then they were compensated.
yes, some of it, but there was still a savings there, and so then that money just went to help balance the budget that year and for all future
But
years.
I mean, as we talk about people doing more with less, they're actually doing more but getting more.
Right.
Okay.
But the thing that's hard to quantify is like $1 more an hour worth the stress of doing a whole bunch more stuff. And that's where it's like, it depends what it is, right? Ask Rich about the senior center here in a minute and see what he says. So, yeah, so it just depends on what it is. If how much more, like, are they really coming out ahead? Like, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends what it is and who's doing what and
Well,
stuff like
I'm
that.
just thinking of the whole machine
Right.
as opposed to the individual.
Right. And like that, you know, like some of that is unsustainable because at some point, most cities are growing in employees and we're actually shrinking. So at some point, like it's the toothpick that breaks the camel's back, right? Like at some point, like there is no more capacity. And if you read studies, like it's not good for employees to be busy 100% of the time. They should have some downtime in their day and things like that.
So,
and
so
for
thus the
production.
question is, why wasn't she replaced?
Because sometimes there's fat on the bone too, right? Like, and sometimes we have like these weird, so like,
Just as long as we understand there's
like, so we, for example, Chris is an employee that's retiring in my department. So you guys all know Chris. So yeah, he might be, who knows? I'm budgeting because he might be. So who knows? But Chris,
What are you saying?
so Chris does, so he does janitorial work. He does the website. He does all of our social media stuff. He does, you know, like public communications, all sorts of stuff. He shovels snow. Like, where am I going to find an employee that does all that stuff? Probably not going to happen. So I'm going to, like, if he retires during the year, I'm going to have to figure out what I need most and where and stuff like that, and then try and fix the rest. And so that's the problem too. Lynette was like that. Her job was totally like she did prosecution work, she did city administration work, and she did like some building inspection stuff. And so, you know, like where do you find an employee that can do those things and stuff like that? And so we try to look at it when somebody's ready to retire and say, okay, is this what we need? Do we need something different? And go from there. Anyways, that's why my wages are going up, because there's a possibility of retirement.
You're getting an increase?
What? Yeah. Right. Okay, and then insurance, I'm just going to keep going and ignore all that. So then insurance, this is going to need to change because we got our renewal and it's going up. Special department expenses, this is mainly just merchant fees that we pay on credit cards. Since COVID, we get very little cash. We used to get a ton. Part of that is courts not going on, and so I'm budgeting to increase that. And then you can see this is our internal service fund allocations. My department, so those who know my department, so we cover the front staff. We do AP, we do payroll, we do accounting. Angie's in my department, so we do utility billing. Largely, my department interacts with the customers that come in to pay or calls or those kind of things. So the biggest thing with my department is if the city gets exponentially bigger at some point, we need more people because we are pretty bare boned. If you look at like Roy, they have like 5, I think, people who do utility billing. We have 1. And Roy is definitely bigger, but we are, for the most part, a pretty bare bones staff. And that's kind of how my whole department is. So as we get bigger, yes, there is a possibility that we will need more coverage up front because can you answer the phone that quick? Can you pay that many bills? Can you do those kind of things? But at what point that is, it's kind of anybody's guess. It's kind of just as things get bigger, we'll need to look at that. And that's probably my biggest concern for my department. A lot of it's really good. We have a lot of really good people. We have a lot of people who've been here a long time, some a lot longer than me, like Chris Stone, who's been here almost 30 years. So, but anyways, that's my department. So,
I missed something.
Yep.
We got the bill for the Utah League of Cities and Towns,
okay,
and it's quite a bit more than
last
we
year.
had budgeted. Yeah,
You know why?
because they base it off of sales tax.
Well, and you know what else I think?
What?
They hired that Liam, whatever his name is, the ARPA
Oh
guy.
yeah, Threlkill, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think they want to
Analyst.
keep him. And so I think they're increasing everybody's assessment because
Really?
they've got new employees.
And I have no idea how they did it in the past, but I just know. I
Because it used to be off population, I'm pretty sure.
it's population, and a lot of it's off of sales tax.
Yeah.
And so I think we had 8,000. It's closer to 11, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And that's fine. We can tweak that. Fund 46 we don't use right now. Non-departmental. So right now, this is where I have our ARPA expenditure setting. Depending on what we spend them on, this might change. So if we pay for like water infrastructure, then we're probably going to have to do a transfer from the general fund to the water fund and then expend the ARPA funds there. But until we know where that is, this is just kind of a placeholder. And I'm hoping we do have $1,025,000. I'm hoping we can spend some of that by the end of the year so that we don't have as much on hand. That's why I'm not budgeting the whole amount. And hopefully we can spend a chunk of it. The budgeted transfer, this is the transfer to the capital projects fund. So this is what I'm just estimating at this point we'll have. And this 1.5, you can see it's higher by 300,000. It's because I'm budgeting those franchise taxes to be transferred because we really need to save those because we've implemented them for 2030, right? And so they're available for like one-time appropriations, and we don't really want to just absorb them into the budget, or when we get to 2030, it'll be gone, and we'll just have that much bigger hole. We do pay for about $80,000 of internal service funds out of this, and this just covers, because the IT fund pays for like our phone system, our internet, a lot of our copy machines, all that's our Office 365 licenses, in addition to like laptops and things like that, and just general service maintenance and things like that. So that's what this $80,000 covers. So at the end of the day, I had like $13,000 left of money when I balanced the budget. So that's the non-departmental department. Okay, the next one's police. So you can see there's the citywide facts. And if you look at these line items, you can see his biggest increase. So the reason that line really ticks up is because of wages. There is a couple retirements in here, but for the most part, it's just increases. And that's due to just what's going on politically and stuff with police.
Good question. Are they getting roughly the same percentage, or are they getting a different percentage than the rest of the city?
Well, we survey every job, right?
Right.
So every job is different, the percentage they get, but they are getting the higher percentages. So if you think about like an average, right, you have people who are well below and people who are well above. The police, for the most part, are the ones that are well above.
Sure. Because they
That-
are county, statewide. I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yep. So,
A lot of questions about that,
right.
and I just played dumb. I say I don't know what we're doing. You know.
So, and then other stuff, you can see he's increasing his travel and training budget. It's been a long time, I think, since he increased that. And obviously, like with everything, travel and training's going up. Some of his assessments are going up, just like his Lex Pool, his WatchGuard warranty. It actually looks like it's going down just a tiny bit. Fuel, obviously, who knows how much fuel is going to cost, and so he's got a fairly large increase there. This is the animal shelter amount that we pay to South Ogden. Some of his other services here for like CSI, these go to other departments. We've got a small increase there. Miscellaneous, we've got $11,000 there. That just kind of is a catch-all, and he needed a little more there. Right now, he has officers. If you remember, like if they're serving on SWAT and the drug task force and some of those, then he doesn't have to pay the assessment. So right now we have $2,000 in there. However, he said that due to a change in assignments and stuff, that he might have one of those officers come back. So we might need to bump this up to pay one of those assessments rather than having an officer on there.
Let me get a clarity on this. In the past, Chief Brinkman has made a comment that it could be detrimental to his budget, and I'm summarizing, if there was a critical incident, and whatever that means. And so, take for example the other night when they called out the SWAT. Now, did we get charged, hypothetically, we get charged or we do not get charged? But because we have somebody on the task force, we don't get charged, or because I'm, you got 2,000 there, and I'm not following this. If you would please.
So, is that on? So, SWAT fees and those fees that we pay, what they do is they look at a 5-year average. We get credit for if we have an officer on SWAT, that makes our bill a little bit lower. But they go on a 5-year average of SWAT call-outs. Well, we kind of pride ourselves in always being able to take care of our situations that some people might call SWAT on, and we've been pretty dang good at it. We haven't called them out for several years. So we'll have this one call-out when they redo the budget for SWAT next April. That will increase a little bit, but it's not a lot that we pay. I think our SWAT bill this year was only like $835. Now we do pay for our officer when he goes to training and everything he does. We pay their wage. We pay not all of their equipment, some of it, but there isn't a big cost there. But the more you use SWAT, the higher your bill gets.
Okay, so it could be on, where's that line? The task force, what's HTF?
That's the homicide task force.
Okay. If we use it, then it follows that same.
The task force works differently. It's a $500 yearly fee, and that's based on how big your city is, how big your police department is, and those things.
Okay, because when you say 2,000, I'm going, what does that mean?
And I think a lot of what you're remembering too is like if he has a big incident, then a lot of times he's calling out his guys, so then he's got a lot of overtime.
So years when we have 2020, when we have 2 homicides, is destructive to our budget when we have those types of incidents.
Primarily for overtime.
Yep, overtime and other costs. So the big reduction there, normally we pay about 80, it's based on your population. Normally we would pay about $8,900 to the Weber Morgan Narcotics Strike Force. We have someone working down there right now, and so we're not paying that fee. But come July, I'm not sure if we're going to have somebody there. We may have them back here. So I may have to add that $8,900 back into that, which would take it just shy of $12,000.
Thank you.
And then can I just ask, that new camera system that has been talked about,
Flock.
is that in this budget, or would that be like a capital?
That would probably be something that would go to capital if we were to do that. We did not include
not on
that
there
this
right
year.
now.
No.
Okay.
No.
Thanks.
Okay, and then we got our internal service funds right there. And that just pays like we've talked. Theirs is so big here, it's mainly because of their fleet, all the vehicles that they have. And so if we're going to rotate them on like a 5-year plan, then we figure out how much it's going to cost us for those 5 years, and then we charge like a fifth each year. And so that's kind of how it works. So that's the police department. Okay, so we'll let Chief Brinkman talk for a minute about his department.
Okay. So I'd included some information in the packet, and if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I'd encourage you to do that. Obviously, I've talked to you a lot about some of my main goals. The first main goal is retention, trying to keep our people. We've never, and this isn't me just trying to brag. You go out there and ask any officer that works for us. Our department has never been better than what it is right now. Unfortunately, I'm going to have probably 4 retirements in the next 6 months. And they're all people who have worked almost their entire career here. So those are hard people to lose. So it's been difficult over the past year with wages, because we do tend to run about a year behind, and all these cities started doing all this crazy stuff starting last July. Threw us off for about a year. We survived it. We did kind of some last September, tried to bump some people up within our pay scale, but we've got to stay competitive with the wages, and we are going to get competitive with what we're doing here. I do worry, hopefully we're not going to have the same thing that happened last year come July, that people are going to start making these big increases again and put us behind.
Real quick, you said retirements, police, is it 20 years or 25?
20. Well, it's if you're a tier 1, it's 20. The tier 2 people, which started in, was it 2011?
After July 1st of 2011.
2011, those are tier 2, and they're 25-year retirements.
So, all right.
And the other thing with retention is basically just trying to stay competitive with our benefits, anything that we can offer to employees. There's a lot of cities that are doing things that we don't do, that maybe we could look at in the future
question.
to try and make it better.
On the tier 2, I know some cities like pay the difference or something like that. Do we do anything like that, or like?
So we do one thing. So some cities they actually do like a benefit spread so that you pay the same amount regardless. Right now with tier 2, there's a required contribution. If you remember a couple of years ago, the employee would have to fund it. The city elected at that time, and once we elect to do it, I think we have to stay that way to pay that difference. So we are paying that difference that some cities aren't, but we aren't paying a differential on that. So what they do is say like a tier 1 retirement account is 32%, and a tier 2 is 22% or something. So say there's a 10% difference, then they'd make a 10% 401k or 457 contribution for that employee. We don't do that currently.
Okay.
And there are some places that do that. So I've always said it's important to have strong political support. It's never been an issue here, thanks to all of you and previous people on our councils. I can't tell you how important that is. People we've hired from other jurisdictions, that's something that they talk about quite a bit. So that's important. Obviously, our recruitment, a lot of that comes with what we can offer in pay, benefits, how can we be better? And to be honest with you, we don't have as much of a carrot to dangle anymore. It used to be, when we brought some people over from South Ogden and other places, we could say, hey, we'll pay you $4 or $5 an hour more. It's not going to happen at this point in time, where they've actually been paying more than we have. I think we're probably going to be about even with them when it all shakes out. I don't know what their increases are. Roy just did a big increase as well. So it's really, really competitive in the police world. Like you said, that's a question that you're always getting. Everyone wants to know what everyone's doing. I get the same phone calls. What are you doing? I never want to tell them, because then it puts the idea in their head. But it is getting more difficult to try and recruit, and we just don't. Most people coming out of the academy already have a job. They've been hired, they've been put through by the agency, or they're getting picked up while they're in the academy. So you don't have a lot of those new recruits coming out as much. So manpower, I put in there, if you've obviously looked at the staffing authorization plan that's always put in there. We operate with less people than we had in 2003. 2003, we had 20 officers. We have 19, and a lot of that's probably, maybe it's our fault. We haven't asked because we had to cut back, and we were okay with that, and we've operated pretty well. But we're really getting to the point where it's not really doable. The last 2 weekends, we've had priority one calls where we couldn't send anybody. Other agencies have handled the calls. So the problem, it's like when we had this incident Friday night, I got to get on the phone and I have to try and get everybody in the department here. And you might get 50% if you're lucky, because people are off doing whatever. And the amount of manpower it takes to man something like that, when you really think about it, every little step that has to occur. Well, at the same time, when this call comes in, within the hour, we get a stabbing in progress at an apartment complex. We don't have anyone to send. We never even responded on it. We had to send 2 other jurisdictions. They had to use force to enter the apartment. They had to use force on the subject. And so those types of things I can handle. Agencies help each other all the time. We help South Ogden, Roy, they help us. I don't like it when we're having priority one calls that we're not even sending anyone to. Saturday night, we had same sort of problem with our officers actually stopped a home invasion robbery over at the Green Hill Apartments. Got in a pursuit. Several firearms were thrown out the window during the pursuit. We had some other calls that came in, and then the week before that, we had an officer. Everyone was tied up, and he went on a fight in progress and ended up fighting this person. These 2 were going at it. He couldn't even get them to separate, and he ended up having to fight the one guy. And it's just, these are bad positions to put our officers into. Now, this has happened before, but the problem is it's the type of calls. The types of calls that we're going on are getting to be more and more 2 to 3 officer calls. Even all the mental health calls that we go on, they just require more manpower because of the way that they need to be handled, more so than in the past. If you saw the picture that I put in there of that incident, when I was in patrol, rarely did you ever go on someone that was going to jump off a bridge. We get the call all the time anymore. And you get there and there were actually people hanging onto the fence. Unfortunately, we had a kid who jumped and ended his life in the past year. And so it's just more the types of calls and the manpower that requires is what is getting more difficult for us to deal with.
Can I interrupt you, please? You talked about the tangible of what keeps and recruits officers, meaning pay, training, equipment, yes. The intangible, as in a group of officers, other agencies. And I said, what would it take for you to leave? Hypothetical. And it was like, because Riverdale's always looking, and I'd pitch in Riverdale. I always do. And they said, with this agency, I can do a whole array of things. If I want to be a detective, if I want to do what in Riverdale, I'm going to be patrol. That's all there is. You have other, intangibles that you use to help recruit. Off topic, but I know this is budget, but a lot of times that's the kicker when the pay is equal.
Yeah.
It's the intangibles.
So that's a part of it that I'd put in this document as well. Especially assignments are huge to officers nowadays.
Yes.
They're big. We've had people leave over that, and there were 2 of our guys that went to Salt Lake City, and that was one of the main reasons they left. I mean, pay was one of them, but specialties was another one. So for us, it's difficult because we do have, like right now, we have someone in the strike force, but we don't always do that. We usually do about a 2-year deal on that, but there's been times in the past where we haven't done it at all because I didn't think we had just didn't have the manpower to do it. It hurts us. But then I run that risk. Do I not offer that opportunity? and risk people leaving because they're not being given these opportunities that they want to have that they can get with other agencies. So I'm constantly weighing that out. You know, where do we go with that? We have detectives, we have a person assigned to SWAT, we have a canine officer, so we have motors. So we do as much as we possibly can, but there's nothing else that we can really add to it. Is there some truth to that? Yeah, there's a lot of these places you can go. You can go to school resource. You can do that for years and years and years. There's some places that let you stay in detectives your whole career. We don't do that. We tend to rotate it out more and give people more opportunities. So, but it is a big deal. Real quick, 'cause I'm probably about out of time. I don't even know when I started. You got me on the timer? The
No,
buzzer?
but
We don't have a time limit.
So the one thing I'll say about manpower, just as we look at adding, like I didn't put in to add someone this year, but I really think we're man, I'd like to at least get our officer back that we lost 17 years ago. I mean, that's a long time to go. And when you look here, and you can say, oh, geez, your population's only 9,000. You've got 19 officers. You're way overstaffed. Look at the types of calls. Look at the arrests. When you look at this chart that I put in here, we made more arrests than Roy Police Department. They're double our size in manpower. You can look at anything on there and you can see you've got to look at certain specifics. What types of calls are going on? So, and then when you look at adding in some of these apartment complexes, condos that are coming in as the population grows, I put in there an example of what the Maverick has done to us, and now we're getting another one. Okay, 119 police calls to Maverick in 1 year. 119 calls, that's a lot of calls. They're probably right up there with Walmart. I didn't run Walmart's numbers, but they're probably close. And then so far this year, we've been to 47 calls over there. So I'm concerned. We have a Maverick going up there across from the motel. And the motel, we're up there every day, sometimes more than once. And are we going to have stuff filtering out of there? So some of these, and not every business that we bring in will bring a lot of calls, but the more restaurants we bring in, things like that, the more people that are being drawn into the city. So there's definitely concerns there with manpower. And then I'll just kind of reference real quick. If you get a
Gee, sorry. So I notice each month when I look at that you have less than you had, and I always kind of wonder how that happened or where. Do you want to just share that with us just briefly?
So what happened was when we went through the whole tax redistribution, we had a sergeant that retired, and we were asked not to fill that position. That was in 2007. And we just kind of were told, don't hire. That was just kind of thing. And we've made it fine. We really have. We've made it through it fine. And we just kind of got used to, the most important thing was we needed to make sure that we were able to pay our people what we needed to pay. We wanted to get our officers the pay raises every year. So that was kind of the agreement all the way along. But, sometimes it's hard when the city does have money. And, I'm a believer in if you're going to impose new taxes on residents, it ought to be used for city services. And if there's a need, we should use those taxes for those things. Doesn't mean that we use that whole amount, but I think we need to at least explore, how do you go to a resident and say, we're going to impose a new tax on you, but I'm going to save it for 7 years because we got something bad coming. As a resident where I live, I don't like that. I can stomach, we need police officers or we need, whatever it is. So that's kind of the history. We just haven't, we've kind of just played nice, played the game. And really, like I say, in all honesty, we felt like we've done pretty well with the manpower that we've had.
Because I always look at it, and I mean, so you say you're only down one, but it said, in 2005 you had 26 full-time equivalents, and you're down to like 22.
What happened was we lost also a support staff.
Okay.
That was one of them. And at that time we had 5 part-time officers, so those equated to 1.25. And those were officers that helped fill the gaps. And we got rid of that because it wasn't working. But we didn't convert that to a full-time person. So we're at really, as far as officers are concerned, we lost 2.25 in officers. Now this year, Roy City, their chief told me he's asking for 5 officers, 5 new positions over in the police department. So, there's definitely some staffing concerns. Take a look at this National Order of the Police report that I put out. 101 officers been shot in the line of duty as of April 1st of this year. That's a 43% increase. There is a drastic. It's 63% over 2020. And that report will tell you that it doesn't even account for the number of times that officers are being shot at and people are missing. Okay, well, I hate to tell you, I never thought it'd happen. It just happened Friday night. And it's just kind of unbelievable that we're kind of a stat in there now. But I'm pretty concerned. I want to make sure that, and I'm not saying we got to hire all these officers, but it would be nice to explore, and whether we need to do more with tax revenue and try and make some changes with property taxes or use some of this other money. It's something that we're going to need to explore in the police department as we continue to grow commercial district population in the city.
Do you know, on average, an estimate of what it costs to add an officer, adding in a vehicle, everything?
It's kind of, I can ballpark it. Some of it depends on, are you hiring a brand new guy, or are you hiring someone that you're going to have to pay at the top of the pay scale? And is he a tier 1 or a tier 2? It can change it, $10,000 to $25,000. But I'm in a ballpark of between $140,000 and $150,000 by the time you do a vehicle and equipment, salary, benefits, and everything else. Yeah.
And that's probably low.
Yeah.
Like if you're talking vehicle and everything, it's probably 150 to 180.
And it, like I say, it all depend on what you pay to and what the retirement is and all that. So, other questions or?
That was a question I had, so that was a good question.
Okay, I didn't make it through everything there, but I would just, I'd encourage you to look at that. And then, the bonus that Cody talked about, keep in mind that our guys through COVID were here every day. There was no work from home. We didn't work from home. We were here every day. There were other cities that were here every day. We were going in houses that had COVID. I tried to get hazard pay. Was told I couldn't do it. Okay. Other cities around us, they gave hazard pay. Paid for it out of those funds. We almost lost some people over it. I mean, people were mad over that. And that's kind of a difficult thing. So like this bonus, is a good thing. Some of these departments that have paid their raises, they back paid too. They went back, gave them 6 months of back pay. So those are just some of the things we're dealing with trying to retain. We're lucky we have a great culture in the city and the police department. Credit to everyone. So we appreciate your support that you give to us.
Thank you.
Okay, so the fire department. So we've got our citywide facts here. Jared does want to change one, so it's not just one part-time position because of the FTE. I believe it's either 3 or 4 that add up to a full-time position to one full-time position. So we have that included in the budget, and like a reallocation. That's part of the reason that the full-time salaries are going up and the part-time look like they're decreasing. Other changes that he has, if you remember, we rolled over $60,000 into this budget to do a bunch of repairs on engine 42. And you can see those have come in lower than was projected. And so that decrease there is due to that one-time money that was put here for that repair. He's got a small increase here in telephones of $1,000, an increase of a couple $1,000s in fuel. Another small increase here in like the fire prevention open house, and then just what our internal service fund allocations are. And so in total, his fund is the $1,960,000. So. So that's the fire department. I think Jared has some stuff he wants to talk about.
Hi. I'm gonna open the magic door. I'm going to prom. I'm nervous tonight, and I almost.
Don't be nervous.
So you guys saw, I kind of, when we talked about doing strategic planning, I took it to heart and actually did a 10-year strategic planning, and that was that document you saw in your packet. So I apologize, mine says strategic planning on it, because if we're going to plan ahead, and when I look at the strategic planning, it's when an organization has an opportunity to look internally and externally to grow an organization and find the problems within those organizations to make changes. And then part of those changes help with retention and safety and all those things that we want to have for our people. And to be honest, I'm like Brinkman, I'm going to brag a little bit. Our people do a phenomenal job with what they're asked to do. It's embarrassing when I have a Walmart fire come in, smoke and flame showing, and I send one guy in a fire truck. It's embarrassing. It's unsafe. What are you going to do with one guy in a fire truck? He did nothing. He managed resources coming in from outside cities that had to handle it. And our guys were transporting a Riverdale resident to the hospital during the event, but had to still take the engine to get the equipment to the scene because we have all the commercial equipment for our city with Knox keys and everything else to work a commercial fire. So I'm very passionate about this job. I'm obviously passionate about safety. And over the last 6 years, I've been tooting this horn, and what I've been asked to do over the last 6 years is find other creative ways to make this work. Staffing wasn't one of those creative ways. So over the last 6 years, one of my biggest things I tried to accomplish was try to find a different way that we could accomplish the safety factor, the response factor, and getting people to the calls that they need to be on. Because it's 911. We never get to pick when we get to leave. And so here comes the South Ogden Air Local. To this day, I can tell you the South Ogden Air Local should have been a success, and it was a success when it was running. It became political. It became a department that doubled their call volume. They didn't want to do that. In your packet, if you look at Station 81 in South Ogden, they run 800 calls a year. We run 1,500 calls a year. They're staffed with 6. We have 3 most of the time, 33% of the time. They increased their staffing after the interlocal. We lost staffing after the interlocal. I never thought for an instant I would work for a department. In 1993, when I went on to Layton City Fire Department, we ran a 2-handed fire truck in 1993. That went away in 1995. It just isn't right. And hopefully you had an opportunity to read through some of this document. I tried to put a little heart and soul in this and give you the information you wanted. But if you want to click to the next one, the first thing I want to do when we talk about strategic planning, I think you have to do a SWOT analysis. You have to look within your department, within your organization, and find out really what are the strengths. And I isolated it more to the department. And thank God we have a lot of good, dedicated people who love what they do. And part of the reasons they love what they do is because of the city they work for. That's just a fact of the matter. We don't have turnover with our full-time personnel. We have significant turnover with our part-time personnel. Part-time's a whole nother thing we can talk through, but I'm going to make sure I get through this quickly because I had to do a PowerPoint to keep myself on my timeline. So one of the things you'll notice too is when I first got here, ambulance billing was a problem. We about lost the ambulance. I think it's a tremendous service in this city that we have an ambulance service. There's a reason why we went away from the old ambulance service you used to have to what we have now. When I first got here, Roger said we was going to get rid of it because it only brought in $185,000 revenue. Cody's projecting 390, Gold Cross is projecting 402. So we've taken our ambulance revenues and almost doubled them in that time period. And a lot of that, I gotta give credit to my people because to get your ambulance revenues up, you have to properly charge, properly fill out the paperwork, make sure you're getting signatures, getting the medical information. I can't do any of that. They have to get at the hospital. So our people have bought off on that culture, and they understand that that ambulance revenue is something that hopefully comes back later on to support the department. Work ethic, ambulance, the heavy rescue agreement. We'll show some stuff in a minute on the heavy rescue. Weaknesses, number one, emergency management. In your packet, you can see all the stuff I came up with emergency management. We are lacking greatly in emergency management. We lost funding in a county this year for the first time I've ever heard of a county losing funding for 1 year on non-disaster funding because our emergency management plans are not in line. And it's not the requirement that's set forth by the FEMA and by the federal and state governments. That's getting changed out, starting to work. We're missing out on 50% salary reimbursement right now, potentially, for an emergency manager. But we have to have that person in place to work towards doing some of that. But some of the opportunities that we want to take advantage of and we continue to look into now that we can train a little bit more, our training never stopped. I'm like Scott, we never stopped working. None of us worked from home. We kept working. In fact, we were buried in COVID. We provided all the supplies. We went on every single call. We were exposed to COVID. We had COVID patients. We had COVID people. COVID was a nightmare, and it still is to some extent. We still have COVID meetings every month. But some of the other opportunities that we're missing out on really is some of the funding opportunities through diversified taxations and response capabilities that we simply don't have because of staffing we're limited to. And then you can look at the threats. Like Scott said, yeah, we're a 9,000 populated city, but there are very few cities I know of that have a rail line, 3 highways that run through it between Riverdale Road, I-84, I-15, and 2 airports. And we've averaged a crash a year since I've been here. And we've just dodged the bullet that nothing's went into our structures. They've kind of stayed a little bit west of us. So it's not, the threat level for the city that we are is tremendous. And I don't think anybody can argue, let alone the swift water and the flooding and all the fun stuff that comes through the city. Can you switch that for me? So currently this is our staffing, and realistically the problem we're running into is our part-time staffing, as we'll show in a minute, is 33% of the time we're what we consider short-staffed. Short-staffed right now is 3 people on a day. There are times that I'll pull it up to make sure I'm giving you the right numbers, but about 4 times a month we go less than 3 people a day, and we have to go to overtime to get us up to 3. So 33% of the time we're at 3 hands in that station. That means if we have a house medical, we have 1 person for a fire truck. The same thing we ran into the Walmart the other day. So to me, we're not meeting the expectations that I believe you have of us of the fire department or the citizens have of us of the fire department, simply because we can't respond appropriately. You can't function a fire apparatus with realistically even 2 people. You have to have somebody pump it, somebody run out with hose lines, and somebody command an incident. At minimum, you have to have that. So as you look
Can I
at,
ask a question about that? Have you considered maybe staffing more during the day versus having less at night, since we have less incidents? Because most of the people are gone out of the city at night.
So part of the retention issue that we have is the state of Utah is basically 4896. It's a standardized fire department schedule. It's a shift work schedule. If I changed up the shift works, I'm really in no different position than PD is on shift work. I'd still require the same amount of people to work the same amount of hours. If I even minimize down to that, I can look at saying, okay, I agree. We still have about a third of our call volume from 8 o'clock at night until 8 o'clock in the morning. And at night, the potential of larger fires, fire loss, and life loss is greater than during the day when people are awake. So that's really where I look at this and I told the mayor this, we're an insurance company. We're your insurance company. I don't want to overinsure us. We're not Disneyland. I'm realistic on what we are. But we're way underinsured. We simply are just underinsured. And it's actually costing a lot more money running the way we're running right now than to add 1 more person, simply because of overtime and expenses and the challenges that we're having. So.
Well, and then I guess along the lines of Annie's question in regards to hiring another officer, what's that equivalent for hiring?
Well, I'll get there.
Oh, just cliffhanger. Got it.
I do have a question about why we're short. Like what happens? I mean, it's obviously not planned to be short. We budgeted for 4 people in there all the time, 24 hours a day.
So can you go back to the staffing? So right on the very bottom, that part-time firefighter. So when we started being full-time at Riverdale, it was around 2010, 2011, right in that area. We had 20 part-time people to offset for that 4th position. And then that fourth position was able to be filled on a very regular basis because we had 20 part-time firefighters. Today I have 10. And every time I start to fill it up, we lose. We've lost 10 in the last 2 years. And we just had another resignation. Nobody wants to work part-time anymore. Part-time's really a struggle for people. People have a life. They put more emphasis on family. They don't want to work multiple jobs anymore. They're getting paid $20 an hour to be away from everybody. And that's going to be this year. Right now they're getting paid between $15 and $17 an hour. They're making what they can over at Arby's to come work as a firefighter. And a lot of them have finally just determined it's not worth it to do a part-time fire job. Now, I also have some very dedicated part-timers, and some of the things we've done to try to keep that position healthy and maintain that position as much as we can, we've offered incentives. One of the biggest incentives we offer is the heavy rescue. Hey, come here, we'll train you. We'll help you train. We get county reimbursement for it. We can help you be part of this program. That's been a pretty good draw for some of those people. And in addition to that, we tell them, hey, sign up 2-3 months in advance. You can also, we'll guarantee you 5 shifts a month. If you want to sign up for a whole year, if you want to take 5 shifts a month, that's guaranteed income as a part-timer for, not too bad of a gig. We have like 5 people who've taken advantage of that. So we've tried all these other incentives to try to encourage part-timers to stay. The one thing we struggle with is I'd love to hire out of the academy. Absolutely love to hire out of the academy and train people from the beginning. But there's no way I can put an academy student right out of the academy, third person on a fire truck, or one person in the back of an ambulance with 0 experience. If we had the 5 people there, and even if that whole one row is part-time, I now have the opportunity of hiring new people, academy students across the board, and trying to fill that part-time gap, doing that way. Right now, I don't really have I'm not comfortable with our current staffing position to hire inexperienced people because we put them in some really difficult situations.
Are all your people EMT qualified?
Mm-hmm.
So that is a prerequisite?
Advanced.
Advanced, okay, so that's a requirement before you, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Go. So as you kind of look at the trend from when they first started part-time, they're under 1,000 calls a year. Right around 2015-16, we've seen this bump occur. We had a really dry season in 16 and 17. If you remember right, in 17, we had the big UNA fire. We'll show a little brush fire gap here. And then interesting on this trend is then we start seeing a trend kind of go down in 19 and 20. We were in the interlocal of South Ogden. This is what South Ogden was complaining about because now their call volume doubled on their ambulance service. Instead of running 1.9 calls a day, they ran almost 5 calls a day. So we put that impact on them. They didn't like it. By their own admission and their council meeting, they're wearing our stuff out. We don't want to do this no more. Now our call volume jumps back up to 1,500. We're projected to go over 1,550 right now if it keeps going the way it's going. Fire calls, when I say fire calls, when I'm saying anytime a fire apparatus has been requested to a scene to handle it as a fire unit, not an EMS unit, is about 51% up. EMS units or EMS calls are 54% up. And our business licensing, because we do all the business inspections within Riverdale, we spent the last 3.5 months doing business inspections. We have 20% of our businesses are non-compliant right now, that we have to go back into second and third business licensing to get that fixed. We have Lowe's right now who's getting fined because they can't fix their fire alarm. So by our ordinance, we're finding them right now, it's $548 what they're up to at $48 fire alarm. We usually go on them about every day. They're kind of turning into my Motel 6.
So
His is a lot worse.
of these 1,500 movements, that includes the ambulance?
Yep.
And how many would you say are inside the city and how many are outside the city?
So that one I projected to you before, about 70% of our calls are inside Riverdale. About 30% are outside. So we're supplying mutual aid for about 30% going outside. We're also getting, if you remember right on that chart I sent you, we're over 40-something% of mutual aid coming in of some sort of outside agency. The way the fire departments work in Weber County is every fire department has to hold some responsibility to help the other fire department. No one can do it by themselves, including Ogden. Ogden usually gets 2 other cities in every time they have a fire. Every city within Weber County also takes some responsibility and a specialty because we all can't afford specialties. Ours just happens to be the heavy rescue. Ogden and Weber Fire District also have heavy rescue, and they also have hazmat. Roy has hazmat. South Ogden has hazmat and rehab. And so everybody takes some sort of specialty to support other departments. It's kind of like how you can look at Task Force SWAT and all the things that PD does within theirs. We do a very similar thing within Weber County. So if you jump to the next one, our structure fire, yeah.
Did you say on the fire alarm for Lowe's, you charge $48?
By our ordinance, we can charge $48 for nuisance after it hits 3 or more a month.
So, do we need to look at that and change our fee schedule? Because that's stupid.
Make that 500.
That doesn't even cover
Seriously.
gas.
We'll see,
If you
because
have-
we
if
just
you-
gave them the invoice and we haven't had a fire alarm. So hopefully the $48 works.
$48 doesn't even get you guys in the truck.
Get you some money.
Yeah, look at gas prices.
Yeah, that's $48 every 15 minutes. And right now we only charge them for the 15-minute response because every one of them been false alarms. What happened was Lowe's guy in their lift destroyed their sprinkling system about 2 months ago. And so when they did that, they had to reset the riser. We had a huge flooding issue, had to shut the riser down. After they fixed that, then we started getting the fire alarms because he didn't put a pressure relief valve in there. So every time the city water bumps them, then they're triggering an alarm because they didn't put a delay in that system like they should. So Randy's really been working on them, trying to get their guy to put a delay in that water bump, in that flow alarm. So hopefully that stopped.
Well, we need to look at that fee schedule. I don't know when $48 came about, but that's crazy.
Yeah, that was back.
Back when they had the pumper truck.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, fuel costs weren't what they are today.
Yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
you talked about the revenues from ambulance, and you talked about being called, the ambulance being called. So is ambulance revenue neutral? I mean, does it pays for itself, the ambulance?
So we're still a public service. It's not going to pay for itself, but it offsets.
Okay, offset.
Like, for example, our EMS fund is $12,000. What's our capital fund for our ambulance? 50,000 a year, 60,000 a year. So 60,000 a year. A part-time firefighter, 60,000 a year. 60,000 a year. So we're at 110, and we've got, and then we get charged about 28,000 a year in paramedic board fees. We get charged about 22,000 a year for Gold Cross Ambulance to be our billing company. So roughly, we've got about 100,000 or so, 110,000 in there of actual expenses, and then the leftover to go towards the budget. But
So it really doesn't pay for it. Like if you looked at it as a business, we're losing money. Because if you take into account like Kristen's time and Jared's time and the building's time, like if we allocate depreciation for the building and like all of our admin costs and stuff, it loses money.
Offset.
But it offsets and like it helps pay for a couple of his employees. So like yes and no. It depends how you do your accounting. But at the end of the day, it probably loses money if you really look at it and allocate
Before you
everything.
went to Gold Cross billing, you had commented that you were being able to collect on like 37% of everything, and then it went up a little bit with Gold Cross.
so we were at 33%. No, 28% the year before I came in, then 30% the year I came in. We're at 44% collection rate is what we're projected to do this when we receive this other 150,000 in the next 3 months.
Plus, then Jared's been increasing the fee schedule every year, if you remember. So that's the other thing. We were way undercharging for stuff too.
So I brought us up to allowable fees.
So all that's helped get those up higher.
Yeah, we do a reevaluation of all our medical supplies every year, make sure we're at least not losing money on our medical supplies. We were losing medical supplies before. So there's a lot of things that we changed and just the efficiency. And then, you know, this is the fires and hazardous conditions. The one thing that's interesting about this is we've seen more construction. We start putting all these other businesses in and we start having our nice windstorms and different things that come through. Our hazard condition calls, which are gas leaks, power lines, flammable liquid cleanups, all of a sudden start climbing up. Structure fires, we're sitting about 32 on an average a year. Interesting enough, just because I used to work there, per station at Layton, they average 31.25 structure fires a year at their stations. We're running the same amount of structure fires per station as Layton City is right now. So you see the brush fires in 2017. That was a bad year, real bad dry year. Hopefully we don't see that again. So next, there's your EMS trend. Same kind of trend that you saw. You see a little drop, your vehicle accidents with injuries. This is where, I can talk fire all day, how unsafe it is to bring 1 or 2 people on a fire truck. But when I go on I-15, I-84, Riverdale Road, and the primary function of my engine is to block traffic for those responders on scene, including highway patrol or our PD guys. We use that engine as a barricade. And when you have to respond in a fire truck, you don't want somebody running lights and sirens in a fire truck without a spotter to the right, because then we start blowing intersections and killing people. And so now we're in a position, if we have to take the engine or the heavy, we take nice and slow, no lights, no sirens, get there when we can, not move traffic. So there's a lot of problems. Heavy rescues came up quite a bit. So I wanted to show you, on average, we're only running 13.27 heavy rescue calls a year that we get attached to. We saw a spike in 2018 and 2019. Prior to 2019, we were the only heavy rescue in Weber County. 2019, we assigned the agreement with the heavy rescue program for Weber County. We added 2 heavy rescues. We GPS their stations, and now we send the closest heavy rescue to the incident instead of just Riverdale. Prior to that, we were not getting any funding for heavy rescue. As you saw in your packet, we get $16,900 for salaries, we get $7,000 for maintenance and fuel, and we get reimbursed on every single training that we do, both countywide and regional wise. It's 100% reimbursement at overtime rates. So last year we collected roughly $32,000. I'm looking at over $40,000 this next year on something that is, and we're getting a brand new truck in August. Totally funded at almost $700,000. I cannot stress the value of that truck because, once again, retention, I have no promotions. I have no advancement. I have nothing else in the fire service. That is our retention, to keep people here. It's a lot of training. It's a lot of knowledge. And the more training my people have, the smarter they are and the safer they are. Training is 100% survivability. Next.
So do we use the heavy rescue a lot in Riverdale?
We use it on every car accident.
Every car. But
Every
only
car accident.
13, is that 13 per year outside of Riverdale? Or
No,
what?
those are 13 incidents where the heavy rescue pulled tools or did some sort of heavy function and wasn't canceled, didn't have immediately come back or anything else. They were on scene, and generally with those calls, they're on scene for a couple hours.
Like the cement truck out,
Yeah.
and that'd be an
Right.
example.
That'd be
like
one of those
the
incidents.
North
Yep.
Ogden Divide
Yep.
thing. Those are heavy rescue where you get credit towards that 13.
Yeah, when it falls into a discipline, that one of the disciplines was
It
actually
feels like
used.
it's more than that.
We roll the heavy. Now, if you look at our vehicle accident with injuries, those are just with injuries. That doesn't count the other 60 or so per year without injuries. We roll the heavy rescue on every vehicle accident in Riverdale City, I-15, I-84. We roll it on every hazmat response, every hazmat cleanup, because that's where we store our stuff.
And it leaves our engine in the station.
Is our engine in the station, takes the wear and tear off, and we're utilizing a county resource that they're allowing us to use because that's what we have staffed here. Because if we don't take it and we need it, we don't have it. So they're allowing us to use it. So I'll just really briefly touch on this because this is also in your packet. Primarily, I'm just going to talk firefighter staffing. When you look at NIST, which is the National Institute of can't remember what freaking NIST stands for anymore. National Institute of Standards of Technology. So when you look at these guys, they are a company who comes in, third party, and they study things through science. And it's a really good thing for people in decision-making capabilities. They actually get in non-biased. You have a fire chief telling you, well, I need 10 people to respond on fire if I can put a fire out. No, they actually study it, and they break it down by staffing, response time, and task-oriented things. They study 22 firefighting tasks and how quickly they're accomplished depending on the staffing which was there. And what's shocking when you look at 4-man crews, we're 7 minutes faster than a 2-person crew. 7 minutes on average on a low hazard. Low hazards being single-family dwelling, 2,000 square feet. So next. These are all the other standard and recommendations that also show four-handed engine companies. NIOSH, they review all line of duty deaths. So when we talk about line of duty deaths of firefighters, our number one line of duty death of firefighting is not that they die from disorientation or loss in smoke or burns. They die on the scene or post-incident from heart attacks and strokes, because those tasks are not easy. They're wearing the equipment, they're pulling the hose, they're doing those things. They're very physically demanding. and and basically end up getting an epinephrine dump, and it causes vasoconstriction both in the brain and the heart, and either kills them on scene or kills them later. And that's where we're seeing a lot of our line duty deaths, which I appreciate the budget item in there that we send our people for health screenings, and we also send them for mental health work. So that's great. Next. Those are all in your packet. You guys can look over and read. It has all the same data. Next. Here's your short staffing. You can see what I was talking about. Three or less, 10.1% of the time of the month. It took 3.4 overtime shifts to fill to get us above 2. And then we were 33.8% of the time we were short staffed at 3 or less. Last month is 56%. And what happened was we had one firefighter get injured and one firefighter lost his son. So, and they were both on the same shift. There were 2 shifts last month. We didn't have anybody on duty that we had to backfill.
Son?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that.
Matt Hennessy lost his boy,
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Who?
Hennessy?
Captain Hennessy.
I didn't know that.
So, okay. Yeah, 56% of the time last month because we have 6 shifts. We have bereavement leave. On top of that, we still weren't staffing properly with our part-time staff. Next. So the proposal staffing is I'd really prefer, and I know we've put in the budget this year to eliminate one part-time position and bring it in as a full-time position, which I think will help tremendously with the bleeding, at least for the 33%. It doesn't fix the short staffing problem. It doesn't fix the fact that we have 2 people on fire truck. Ultimately, we have to try to get to 5. Most cities around us have 6. But it'd be nice to get us to 5 so we can basically go to a minimum staffing of 4. And then that also helps us alleviate some of our overtime costs. So to answer your question on the next slide, some of the ways we can accomplish this is if we eliminated full-time or part-time altogether, what comes out is I can bring to the table about $200,000 out of a part-time budget to offset some of that cost with reduction in overtime of $15,000 to $20,000, which brings your estimated cost to 6 firefighters for $308 to $385, which is the same thing we talked about with Brinkman, is you're talking depending on step 1 to step 5. And that's why you have the variations in the 2 pay scales. If we attempt to maintain part-time and add 1 additional person per day full-time, and with the reduction of overtime, the implementation of 4 per day, and we still reduce our part-time budget by $32,000, we can get that down to $197 to about $243, depending on where we bring those firefighters in at. And so that'd be 3 firefighters, 1 per shift added. I think, like Scott said, it's really hard to hear we have money, but ultimately, I don't ever want to see my department take from another department. It's happened here numerous times. It's caused major problems. I don't ever want to see that. For this to happen, we've got to find new money. We got to find new revenue. And Cody can tell you what $300,000 costs you for a tax increase. I don't know. It'd be nice to see public safety put on the property tax increase and let us put the weight on our shoulders and let us bear it. That all new property tax increases is just public safety. It doesn't affect any of these other departments. It doesn't affect 2030. Do that. But that's my spill.
Okay, you've talked about the actual firefighters.
Have to hit next twice.
How's your administrative support?
Myself, I, and Kristen have time.
And is that adequate?
So, once again, if you in your packet, I put in a deputy chief. I'm the only Corps department here that doesn't have an assistant. However, if the emergency management thing could happen, I've already gone to Roy, and I've got Roy bought off on that they will send their battalion chief, who's on duty 24/7, into Riverdale to assist Riverdale on every emergency that would require a chief officer to support me as well. They were here on Walmart. They were here on our trailer fire we just had. They've been coming in. We already implemented that. With the implementation of Roy's battalion chief, and if there was an emergency manager that could take LAPC, take some of the chief stuff off of my plate and help with some of that administrative stuff, I'll back off on the deputy chief. Because for me, the daily staffing is more important than any administrative staffing I can get right now. No, do I have the administrative staffing? No, I do not. I do not have a number 2.
I have a question on the emergency manager.
Mhm.
I didn't see anywhere, unless it comes up later in Mike's, who's taking care of code enforcement. I didn't see a request for a new code enforcement person. If that happens, no, it wasn't addressed. Just wondering. Okay. Just checking.
As it stands now, we're still maintaining and going the way we always have been, but we have been looking at some different options on that. But we haven't been able to finalize anything. I mean, realistically, Randy does a lot of things, and he would be our person we would bring into that position. But by doing that, then I don't have a code enforcement officer. So it's a real catch-22 for us. I've been checking with the county, seeing if we couldn't contract something like that out. I actually went down there and met with them, but didn't get a lot of positive feedback from them. So these are all things we'll continue to look at, and that might be, even if it's a part-time position that we have to fill at some point in time in the near future. But we do have to move on that, and we've added that to our department heads. We haven't had a lot of chances to talk about it, but at least it's back in there, so we can get moving forward on that, because we've got to update that. We're way behind on that, as Chief said. So it's just some of these things have been neglected for a long time. We're trying to get it back, but we can't just do it overnight. But it's in the works. We're moving.
Are any of these requested positions already built into this budget?
Just the one.
The one position
position.
is.
One.
And it's being covered by my part-time budget. So there's no budget impact.
Okay.
I really appreciate your time.
Thank
100%.
you.
Thank you.
Hey, just one crazy question is what's the benefit of having an in-house ambulance service versus Gold Cross or whatever it is?
Were you around during the ACE days?
What's that?
The ACE ambulance days? So ACE ambulance used to cover Riverdale.
I wasn't old enough to understand anything.
Yeah. So one of the things you have with your own ambulance service is when you typically have a closer unit, you typically have people who are trained to your standard. We control the ambulance training because we have to maintain a medical control physician who oversees their quality of insurance. They review our calls every single month. If honestly South Ogden doesn't want it, Roy doesn't want it, they're too busy. The only other option we'd have is Go Cross. If Go Cross got brought into Weber County, he would probably have every mayor within Weber County knocking down his door, because when you talk to Ogden, who brings in $4 million in EMS funds a year to help offset their fire department, and now Go Cross is going to do what? They're going to want to come in and build their domain. It's not Riverdale that brought him here. It's the opportunity that brought him here. So Go Cross would be the next contracted ambulance you could bring in. You just lose basically lose your service level to whatever they're willing to provide. So, and they're going to want to come in and do paramedic service too, and that won't go over well. So I think there's a huge value. There's a huge value to having your own EMS agency. I mean, obviously it's 800 EMS calls a year that ambulance is going on. So, but either way, you got to staff your fire truck, and they're still going to respond on every medical, because there's only about 15% of the medicals that don't require an engine response, according to ProQA, which is our dispatch system that they evaluate. They basically ask so many questions, and they have to send a first responder, an ambulance, and then depending on the scenario, a paramedic unit. Same thing when you look at PD and fire. We always look at worst case scenario. Half-time dispatch information is inadequate or it's not correct, and we don't know what we got until we get there. And our patients average over 260 pounds right now. It's currently why one of our guys are hurt, because we had a 400-pound patient in the back of the ambulance he had to move. So.
Yeah, I was just thinking we kind of create our own problem when we have two guys in the ambulance leave,
Mm-hmm.
and then the one guy goes by himself to the Walmart fire. So, and I'm surprised you didn't put in the Home Depot blaze that was in the news.
Well, the one on the back slide I showed you guys, that was the arson fire, and we had 2 people show up on that fire, and it collapsed on us. So, and we had an 8-year-old reporter trapped on South Weaver Drive too, with 2 firefighters in the truck. What's going to happen is our guys are going to go to work, and they're going to abandon the engine. We called it suicide firefighting in '92. They're going to abandon the engine and run in and hope the thing pumps the whole time. That's what they're going to do. That's what I expect them to do. So, okay. Sorry it took so long.
Oh, you're good.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Well, I need
Oh,
that
you probably are
information.
speaking for yourself. That's what we're doing.
Okay, so community development. So we've got their normal citywide facts. We've got travel and training increasing a little bit. We have fuel increasing a little bit, and then we got the miscellaneous going up a fair amount, and that's because of the. I just forgot the acronym of who that program's through, but we're doing the. Yeah, we're doing the redo of our general plan, and so we have to provide $30,000 of match. So we're providing $15,000 out of his current year budget, and $15,000 out of his next year budget.
Hang on, I got a question.
There's retirement.
Is there?
Yeah.
Who is it? I'm trying to think.
I'm not spilling all the
Hey, don't
beans.
tell me who it is,
So
You
there's a
already said
potential
the one, you might
retirement.
as well say them all.
No, so there's a potential retirement.
There's a potential retirement. Yeah.
That's what I was wondering too. I was like, how do you skip past that? That's $100,000.
That's just a lot, 90 grand.
So, yeah, so I'm going to focus page 38 in your department heads planning reports is what I'm going to be looking at. It's only one page. I don't have quite the presentation of my predecessor. So for better or worse,
You
hopefully
always
that's good.
talk longer, so.
Well, I'll try to keep it short for you, Alan, I promise. So I have on there 4 items. If I were to do them in kind of a timeliness fashion, I'd probably start at number 4 in there where it talks about additional funding for contracted permit review and building inspection services. We have upcoming projects in the form of whether Bach Homes or the America First Campus development, new development, redevelopment, West Bench RDA, those sorts of things. They're very large projects. Our current building official has said that they're way more involved in large and time consuming than his abilities will allow him to be able to still do his building inspections as well as do plan check reviews. So for that purposes, given that those projects come forward, you may see increases in the future to that line item for professional services. Now this budget year, I did talk to him. He thinks what we have in there is probably adequate. I'm thinking it will be because we didn't use as much as we had thought last year. So we're trying to keep it conservative, but that could go up depending on that need. Which leads to then item number 1, which is the planned retirement or replacement of our building official. He's indicated to me and to other individuals, Cody and Steve, that he's at a point where he's probably at the end of his line on his experience as a building official. He's kind of tired and wants to move on to other options and things with his life. I think I don't want to say that he's overly stressed, but he definitely feels overly worked at times with his responsibilities. I don't know if you know that he does his own scheduling. He is his own permit technician and permits administration. All calls come in when people are trying to work through the online software. He works with them. He'll take calls when he's on vacation, so he doesn't feel like he gets true vacations. He does all of his plan reviews and inspections. And he does the whole process all the way up to C of O and does all the personnel and the service one-on-one with individuals. So bottom line is, in the other 2 cities I've worked that position, there's either been 2 individuals that do building inspections. There'll be like a lead inspector and then the secondary building inspector, and or they have a permits administrator or a technician that assists them with that. And when I was here, just like had been evidenced, when I started here in 2013, Lynette did help him with that. He also has to do filing, and she used to help him with that, then help him with doing his permits administration as far as setting up and making sure documents were filled out correctly and all that. He doesn't have that resource. And so it's all on his shoulders. And I've seen him come in some days and he's pretty exhausted, and it kind of, like anything with development, it kind of ebbs and flows. But when it gets really busy, and it's really busy, it's very overwhelming for him. I will say that. That being said, we don't really have a redundancy for him in the event of his retirement. He's currently exploring options with a public works employee. I don't remember. What's his name? Do you know? Dallas. Yeah, Dallas has tried taking the test once. Jeff's assisted him in doing it. He unfortunately wasn't able to pass the test the first time. I think he underestimated the challenge of passing the test to get certified. So Jeff has been working with him on that. but he still hasn't passed his credentials to be able to move forward and potentially move forward in that career field. So where we get into a problem then is if worst case scenario, Mr. Woody retires within the next year and we can't find a professional who we can come to do the job because it's highly competitive field and there's not a lot of people applying for that job. If you go and look at a job board, see how many building inspector and building official positions are sitting open vacant without being filled. The question becomes that professional services budget might have to go like this, and then for lack of a better way to do it, either it's on me and Steve or team to try to figure out, I guess, how to work through what Mr. Woody did for us autonomously until such time we either get that filled or figure out a different strategy. So that in its own right creates a challenge for the city. Moving forward to the second item is the potential retirement of the fire marshal, and it's kind of the same thing. This isn't as immediately, but our fire marshal, code enforcement officer, he's kind of getting in an age where 3 years he's at a retirement age more or less. And again, same question. And we know from what our fire chief said, he helps with a lot of our emergency services management and takes a lot of that burden and make sure that we still meet all of our FEMA responsibilities and try to get FEMA funding and trainings and those sorts of things, as well as our interactions with the county and county emergency services, on top of all of the fire marshal responsibilities, review of plans, all the fire inspections that he does do very, very, very often, I guess would be the right thing to say, as well as the code enforcement and those responsibilities. And were we to, which I've noted, was that if that position was changed and differentiated and became strictly a fire responsibility, then clearly the code enforcement and some of those other land use enforcement things that he does. I mean, at one point he even tried to do handicap parking enforcement. That hasn't happened probably in a year and a half, 2 years, I would say, at least. It's just not happening because it's not something he can get to very easily and readily. If that's something that we would want, we don't have that resource currently. So that's something that, again, in talking to Steve, we have talked, he and I, and for code enforcement, if Randy's not going to be able to do that anymore, how do we accomplish that goal? And I don't know we have that answer figured out at this time, which then leads to obviously number 3, which, you know, again, I can do a lot of things with planning and stuff, but with some of the projects and things that come in and the unfunded mandates from the state and the studies we have to do, like housing studies annually, and we have to do things with our general plan annually, and a lot of the long range planning, it's kind of hard for me to do the immediate planning with the long range planning and keep all the balls in the air without the fear that I'm going to drop something or put the city at liability or risk. And so it almost starts to feel like between what things aren't going to be covered with Brandy and where I see Jeff's position being overworked, and even some things where I feel like I'm having a hard time juggle, there might be a need in the future for looking at another position in the department to help out with those responsibilities. So that's kind of long and short. I don't know, Steve, do you think I covered that fairly well? So that's what we're facing, community development. Obviously, we have some large projects, and you've seen even something like R.C. Willey. There's nothing to say that building couldn't come down and be completely gentrified and a whole new project start, and all the stress that comes with a brand new project and the challenges that come with that kind of a land reuse. So things like that do happen and will continue to happen. It's great. It's a great challenge, but at the same time, having those kind of challenges comes with a need for personnel to help accomplish those challenges and the things that come with that change. So that's kind of the long and short of my presentation. Is that quick enough?
Fantastic.
Perfect.
It would probably be a Vasa, wouldn't it? See where he leaves.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we get something that brings in some sales tax revenue. Any questions? All right. Thanks.
Okay, streets. Okay, we got our normal citywide facts there. We've got some small increases or decreases here, like the mobile phone's decreasing slightly, fuel's going up, street lights is going up, professional services is increasing. You can see this is the amount of money that we have available for Class C and local option. The reason this is down so much is we have to provide a match associated with that CMAQ fund. So part of that money is sitting here, and then the rest of this is local money sitting in this account for that project on 1050 West. And then we have some internal service fund allocations So that's a lot of the streets department. One thing with the street lights, I'm sure Sean will talk about this, is I think we talked to you about it. The Rocky Mountain Power is discontinuing their street light bulbs, and so they're going to terminate a bunch of our contracts. So at some point, we'll have to decide if we want to spend some money and convert everything to LED, or they're basically going to force our hand, and it's probably going to cost some money. Now, long-term payback, usually within like a couple of years, you pay for those LED lights because of the energy savings, but it is an initial upfront cost. Do you have anything to say about streets? Okay. Wow.
That's what you're talking about right there.
Okay, parks. So we've got the same citywide facts for parks. A few little increases. He's got a couple $100 there, a couple $1,000 for fuel. If you haven't bought like Roundup or fertilizer, like they've went up substantially, so he's got a couple $1,000 increase there. Some special department expenses, just a little more there with inflation. Internal service fund allocation, and then he's got some capital outlay, and you can see those budget notes for fiber, tree removal, playground parts, aeration, or an aerator, and a couple other little things.
RDA uses an aerator.
Well, we aerate the ground at the senior housing facility.
That makes sense.
All the grass over there too. So, yep. So that's the Parks Department. Do you have any questions? You adding anything? Okay. All right. So then, community services. So we've got the regular citywide facts here. There are several changes here. I've highlighted most of the changes. You can see a few of them are up, a few of them are down, just depending on what we had for building and grounds maintenance. Rich is proposing an increase. I mean, if you think about it, in a lot of ways, we should probably have a 10% increase on almost every line item. And we're not doing that because we're trying to live within our budgets. So that means that we're not going to buy as much stuff. And once again, we're going to have to do more with less because we've got less budget. But one area that Rich wanted to bump his budgets up was with Old Glory Days, both with the celebration and with the fireworks, to try and keep the level of service. So like with the fireworks, and he can talk more about this, but we buy like a length of a show. So if we just still did the $18,000, you're still going to get fireworks. You're just going to get a shorter show. And I can't remember how much it equates to, but anyways, so that's what we're trying to do there, or what he wanted to do. And then you can see there's a few other changes here. Most of them are just small increases or decreases. And then he has some proposed fee increases that he'll talk about to try and offset or to largely pay for the cost of those activities. Just one plug here. One thing the state auditor's office is really big on right now, and you might have heard about it at the league, is what a fee is. And a fee is something that you're charging a fee, and so the fee should reflect the cost of that service. So like if you're playing baseball, then that fee should largely be covered by that fee, or it needs to be subsidized by unrestricted tax revenue. So like, even, I don't know if you've seen, but like the state auditor's office, they did an analysis of a bunch of colleges, and they found that most of the student fees were paying for part of the sports. And in the state auditor's mind, like that's a big no, because like if your child's going to school and not playing football, then they shouldn't be subsidizing football in a fee. And so that's one thing Rich has been working on, is trying to get those fees to not cover like everything, but to be more accurate with covering those. And so that's mainly those. I don't know if you have any budget questions. If not, Rich has got some stuff he wants to talk about, I'm sure.
While you're coming up, we didn't hear from Mr. Douglas.
I'm gonna do this one time at very end.
Okay. Are you, I didn't know if you were offended that he took your seat.
No,
I thought his was this one.
no, you're in mine.
Okay. Sorry.
His name's on the back.
I'll move. I'll switch him.
I told him if he'd do all the talking, I'd sit in somebody else's seat.
I just put together a couple slides talking about our department and what we're working on, what we're looking at. So on this first slide here, you heard a lot about recruitment and retention. I guess on the second slide, And it's an issue that we're having as well. Most of the positions in my department are part-time, and we rely heavily on a position that we call our recreation assistant position. We're authorized 11 of those. They count as 0.25 of a FTE. We're currently at 5 right now, and I just had somebody give their notice, so now we're at 4. And we're just unable to recruit people at this time. Our department was affected by COVID, unlike the public safety. And as we have bounced back from COVID, our participation numbers are tracking about what they were pre-COVID levels. Sometimes they're even higher, but our staffing is not. We're having an issue as it relates to the communities around us and their pay scales and what they're paying. They've upped their pay to compete with what's going on in the private sector. And I hope that these adjustments that we're making this next budget year will help us give us that little extra. But right now we're behind, and I think that a lot of people are having those issues. I mean, it's probably an economic thing, not just a community services or Riverdale City type of a situation, but that is a concern of ours. We're looking at creative ways to fix that. Recently, in the last year or so, we've explored options with some contract classes where we bring in an outside agency to run classes for us. They staff that. And then we have a revenue split with them, and that's nice because it doesn't put a burden on our staffing, but we're able to offer our service as well. So we'll continue to explore that and continue to work with that. But as it is right now, we're doing that famous thing that we've been talking about all day, doing more with less, and it takes a toll on people. So if we go to the next slide. This is just kind of a brief overview of what we've got as far as capital projects. We went over this in detail our last strategic planning, and as it relates to what Steve was talking about with that 1, 5, and 10-year plan, our facilities are aging, and the capital projects are going to keep moving, and they're going to keep coming. And so we can go to the next one. Oh, I'm sorry, the last slide. There's a gym floor replacement. Just wanted to make you guys aware. That's going to be about a 3+ week project in July that the community center will be closed for the bulk of that. We're still offering our summer programs and activities because those are largely outside. But the community center and the exercise room, the whole gym is going to be inaccessible for about 3 to 4 weeks. This is a project that's recommended every 10 to 12 years, and this will be the second time that we do it on our gym floor. We've been open about 20 years, so we're tracking about industry standard on that. You can do it one more time before they recommend a replacement. What they do is they sand down the wood on the gym floor, and they kind of start, they go below all the paint and everything, they start over. At some point you can't keep sanding down, and at some point you run out of wood to sand. And so hopefully we're about 20+ years away from having to do a complete replacement, but this is a resanding. So just wanted
Can I
to
ask about the generator?
Yes.
Is that just for the living facility part, or is that for like emergency management?
So it's pretty abstract right now. It's kind of in there as a line item in the budget for an emergency management type of thing, but I don't know that anybody's spec'd out a generator or even got bids on it at this point. It's kind of a placeholder as far as money goes. So Cody kind of talked about what a fee is and that kind of thing. In the fee schedule, there is not separate fees for each of our programs that we offer. Okay, those are not in the fee schedule. We determine those fees with administration, city staff, that type of thing. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify how much programs are costing as far as direct related costs, equipment, supplies, and then direct staffings. For instance, a basketball game, we would count the officials and the scorekeepers. It doesn't take into account the administration, the person putting the schedule together, and or my time or the utilities in the building and things. So it's not a direct cost, but it's somewhere to start that we can kind of look at. We've never had a philosophy in the history of our city of trying to recoup costs associated with our fees. We've kind of just subsidized everything, and what we're trying to do is identify a percentage that's realistic for our cost recovery. So we've been tracking that we have percentages with each program, and then we're trying to maximize that. And so we do have some fee adjustments, so that the idea is that the user pays for the service when it relates to leagues and programs. That doesn't apply to everything. We're not going to try to do that with Old Glory Days or some of our other the swim nights. There are still things that we offer, services that we give away. But as it relates directly to league play and camps and clinics and those participants, we're trying to better recoup our costs on that. So if we want to flip to the next one, go ahead.
The fees you charge for like renting a Bowery or renting the room for in the community center is really nominal. I mean, we've been talking about inflation adjusting to, what the going rates are. I don't know what the Bowery is used a lot in both Golden Spike and whatnot. And I don't know, has that been a topic to increase some of those?
So I do have a proposal this year to increase our community center meeting room rental fees. I have not proposed a Bowery fee increase. We are, even with our recreation programs, and we're trying to recover those costs, we're on the low end of everybody in the county.
I know.
Everybody in the region. With our Boweries, we're way low. I have not proposed that. If you guys want me to, we can work something in to the budget. I think it would be appropriate. It's just not a topic that I've hit yet.
Just a quick question. I assume you already have reservations for some of the summer, most of the summer.
We began taking reservations on the Boweries in January for the summer. So any kind of adjustment, my suggestion would be to put the adjustment in January of 2023.
Yeah.
So it would go in this next budget that we're working on. But I would propose, if we do something, we kind of freeze it for the season, so that everybody's kind of
Great idea.
taken care of that way. But
100%.
if you'd like me to, we can put some stuff together and work that in to the final budget. I think we can make that adjustment, Cody. It's just not something we've done yet, so we can take a look at it. But something that we are working on right now is this community center proposed entrance fees. What we're looking at changing, we haven't adjusted those fees in 20 years. So this stuff in red is a new fee that I would like to institute, and then the stuff in blue is an increase in the current fee that I'd like to institute. And that's reflected in the numbers that Cody has put in the budget. And if you flip to the next slide, it was
Just a quick
go ahead.
point.
Yeah.
Can you go back to that? I think one of the real cool things that you've done here, and I didn't actually, I saw what you sent, but you and I haven't talked about this, but to be able to hold the monthly fee where it is, you still, people that really want to use it a lot, I think they still have the option of having like the same fee they've always had, right? Like
that was our goal.
That's
Currently, we have
pretty
not.
awesome, I
We have
think.
never charged the seniors, so that would be new.
Yeah.
But as far as the monthly fee for residents and non-residents, my suggestion is that we do hold that. Hopefully, we sell more monthly passes that way because there's more of a value in it.
The pickleball is, that is used a lot.
800 to 900 visits a month.
And it's like that, where are you going to get that?
So we have pickleball players.
Every day.
This is a real thing. Came to me and asked if they could pay $100.
Oh, wow.
Just like, I've been coming here for years. Could you please take my money? I feel bad not being able to pay.
Yeah.
And we took it as a donation, and
Yeah.
we're talking just a handful. Most of them just take it and run. But I don't know that we'll have any backlash from the pickleball players. I think they expect to pay, and I think they're happy to pay. It's just not something that we've been able to do in the past. If you look at if we keep the same number of visits, we're increasing our revenue about $12,000 just by putting that fee in place. So that's reflected in our budget. And then if you go to the next slide, this is our meeting room increases. It's just a $5 increase on each room, which isn't huge, but I do think that it would be appropriate, and it would help us out when we're trying to make up all this inflationary costs. So, and then on the senior center,
You want me
Oh
to
wow!
pop all
Yeah,
these up,
I didn't
or do
even
you
know I
wanna-
animated it.
I didn't
So
know
look
you
at
could do
that. So we have a transition in management at the senior center housing facility currently. Chris Stone. This gets a little confusing. So Cody talked about his possible impending retirement, but he has been working a second job as an RDA employee, second paycheck, second everything. And so he goes over in the afternoons and works a second job. Effective last Friday, he is done working there. And so Steve has asked my department to take that over. So we no longer have a RDA employee. Again, we're talking about doing more with less. This is what we do. So Miranda's going to be taking care of the day-to-day. She's over there 40 hours a week. She'll be able to initiate work orders and that type of thing. And then my role is going to be helping with the move-in, the move-outs, as well as being able to take after-hour phone calls. And then my role in taking those after-hour phone calls is to be able to direct them to the proper source. So if we have an immediate water leak or something like that, I'm not responding to that. We're going to call the on-call guy in. But the variety of calls that we get over there and the things that we need somebody with knowledge to be the first person to answer that phone. And so that's kind of why we have that set up. And then Public Works is helping us out with the work orders and the maintenance on the facility. There's some concerns over with that facility. We talk about services, and everything we do is a service, and there's nothing we can do to change that. Talking about the cost recovery as it relates to the programs that I run in my department, they're all services. They're never going to 100% pay for themselves. As it relates to the senior center, everything we do over there is a service, and it's very important to the people that receive those services. As it relates to the housing component, that's a service that we're subsidizing currently. And there's a concern with that. The rest of us, we don't get our housing subsidized. But the individuals that live over there do.
Are we Section 8 HUD?
No.
No, we are not.
Okay.
Our rates are below the Section 8 HUD, if you'd like to know. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to, we talked about this at the last strategic planning, get to the point where the monthly rates that we charge are consistent with being able to fund the depreciation associated with that facility and all the operating costs. And rather than doing that all at once, we've looked at trying to do a 3-year plan on that. And then Cody can go over the numbers as that relates to this year right now. But we have a proposed rent increase this year, and it's part of a 3-year plan. So, but before we get into all of that, does anybody have any questions as it relates to either the community center or the senior center portion of my department? Okay. So I'll let Cody take over as far as what we're looking at with the RDA funds and revenue and all that.
Don't run away in case they have questions. So just as a reminder, the RDA area is now expired. So we're not getting any more money. And so that's part of the reason that it's so important that we look at this right now. And so like last year we did a 5% increase. This year we're proposing a 10% increase. So you can see these are the current rates, $585 for a 1-bedroom, $766. 10% increase is about $59.77. So the new rates would be $644 and $843. So Rich and Steve and myself have spent a ton of time looking at different rental rates. And if you remember back to our discussion, we were talked about covering our depreciation. And so last year we had about $23,000 before our increment transferred, and depreciation's $104. So we're short about $81,000. So we talked about being in this range with our rents. This is 1-bedroom, this is 2-bedroom. So one of the things that we found is this is the HUD rates. And so for the Ogden Clearfield area, 1-bedroom's $891 and 2-bedroom is $1,105. So if you look at this HUD rate, it's still affordable housing because it's HUD, and technically with some of the RDA provisions, we should be affordable housing. Now, that's never been formally defined, but HUD is affordable housing. They index this rate up every year, so we thought this is probably a great way to go because then we can just match whatever this rate is. So that's our plan for in 3 years to get to this $891 and $1,105. Well,
In the previous slide you had new move-ins so
I'll explain that.
Okay.
Pause. So one of the things that staff brought up is that if we are doing this 3-year plan and we bring somebody in at this lower rate and they can't afford that rate in 2 years, we're going to be moving them in for a year and then moving them right back out, right? So, and then we also have a thing where people will move apartments because they want new carpet or they just want a different floor or something like that. So one of the things we've talked about is if anybody moves, they'll pay those our new market HUD rate rents. And so then they will help subsidize the facility faster. Now, in the next 2 years, we don't know what the rental rates will do. And so we're not saying that we're going to increase XYZ percentage the next 2 years because we're just going to see how it goes. But our plan is to do incremental increases so that in 3 years, we're up to this HUD rate for everybody.
And real quick, what we'd like to do with approval of this budget and approval of this plan is to notify the residents currently living there. This is the increase for this year, and it's part of a 3-year plan. I don't think at this point it would be appropriate to spell out what that 3-year plan is because we're still developing it. But we want them to know that we're trying to get from point A to point B, and we want them to have as much time as possible. We want to try to be as compassionate as we can with this and really as transparent as we can in the communication. And I think by saying, okay, it's a 10% increase this year, here's your new rate. Any new move-ins are at this level here, and we're trying to get you from here to here in a 3-year period of time. If they need to make arrangements, and that gives them as much time as possible to get to where they need to be or to be able to afford it. But what that does for us as well is it helps the facility as it relates to the housing portion be sustainable. Because currently we're just eating into our reserves, and when we run out of that, then I don't know what we're doing. Are we using general fund to fund for people's housing so that's the
How
plan.
come we're not just going to new move-ins, go right to the HUD rate?
The new move-ins are.
That's the goal.
The new move-ins will go right to that HUD rate. And one thing, part of the transition period is, so we will accept Section 8 housing assistance, but we don't want to run the program. And it takes 2 years to get on that program. So by doing this over a 3-year process, like Rich explained, it should be very compassionate. So people have options. They should be able to, what else can you find for $891 and $1105? Nothing probably, but that aside, they have time to look into Section 8 or Ogden Housing Authority or some of those things. And so we thought this is a fair way to do it, and it gets us to where we need to be at the end of the road. And we'll have to see these numbers penciled today, so hopefully it'll work, but we may have to adjust plans when we get there or down the road 3 or 4 years and see if it's really going to work. But it looks like it should, and we like the idea of blaming it. We'll just do whatever HUD says, and that's easy to look that rate up. And anyways, that's kind of our plan, if you guys are okay with that.
Just by way of information, in a previous capacity, I did a lot of interactions with Weber Human Services, housing authorities, and whatnot. And trying to get people into a true Section 8 is based on the person's income and a portion that can't exceed 30% or whatever. And so when I said, "Are you Section 8?" We're not. But using the HUD rate is a standardized way to give a market value. Now, it takes. I just help somebody get into St. Benedict's Manators, the Section 8. And it takes, depending on your situation, it can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. So this is a good way to be, like you said, humane about it.
And we have spent, I don't know how many hours, but tons of time talking about this
Lots
thing.
of hours.
Can I ask, how are you doing the incremental? Is it when their leases are coming up, or is it all at once at a certain date?
So historically, we've done increases September 1st because we feel like, okay, we really can't tell them there's an increase till you guys approve the final budget. So that's June 21st this year, right? So then we can tell them, and that gives them a couple months to prepare for the
For the
increase.
lease, we need to give them a 30-day notice on that.
Right.
So when you calendar everything out, if we approve this budget,
So part of their lease, we have it built in that we can raise rates before their lease expires
So
with
the,
notice. Okay, I
Yeah,
just wanted to
That's
make sure.
correct, but we're
With
also
notice.
doing new leases for everybody. So everything's getting revamped. This whole program is getting beat up.
So the idea behind it, in the way that it pencils, and the way that the calendar works out, is I would notice them in the middle of July. Once we get this approved,
Yeah.
final budget, we get into that, and I notice them in the middle of July, and it's effective their September 1st rent payment is kind of what we plan on trying to do. And effectively you're grandfathering the current people in, right? And then anybody new in the facility would just come in at that higher rate. And we don't know what to anticipate as far as, is this going to cause people to move? Is this going to, we don't know. And so, you know, if we have 3 or 4 people move and they come in at the higher rate, then we're doing a lot better as far as budget wise and getting to where we need to be. So we'll just kind of have to see how it goes.
And I think your messaging is really good. Like, and that's the terms you've got to put it in is our residents are paying into the, whether it's our property tax or somehow we're subsidizing those apartments. And not only that, it's taking money right out of our other departments. I mean, are we withholding a firefighter or police, or recreation programs or whatever it is to subsidize someone's rent? We don't.
Yeah, and we don't have any kind of income verification, so I don't know on what basis they deserve that
And I'm sure that was
subsidization.
never the intent,
No.
knowing the person who set it up.
Yeah.
No.
I have a feeling, right?
Those officers make calls there to the.
Probably not too often.
If you remember this meeting a couple of years ago, I can't remember if it was police or fire or both responded. Because you remember it used to be there.
So, but currently the general fund, and this isn't taking money out of the police or the fire budget because it's coming from the RDA,
Sure.
right?
Sure,
But
it has been, yeah.
right. Well, and we have money in there.
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
not
that's
collecting
true.
an increment, but we have money in there.
Yeah.
It's just that money is going to become depleted, and there's
will,
no new money
yeah.
coming in. So I just want to clarify, it's not taking away from the other departments currently, but if we don't do something about it, then yeah.
It will.
So we want to just get it right before we get to that point.
Touch about level of service with this change. Some things we might not be doing that we have been.
Yeah. So Steve kind of alluded to people signing new leases. As we've been talking through this whole thing, I suggested to Steve that we sit down with all these people. Some of these people have been there for 17 years. And we sit down with all of them. They sign a 6-month lease when they first move in, and then it's month to month after that. And we're looking at the lease, and the lease was just not accurate to what we were doing. And so I told Steve, first things first, if I'm going to put my hands on this, I want to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do in the lease. And so we're going through getting a whole new lease put together not a ton of changes, just cleaning up a few things in there. We're going to sit down with everybody, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and do a new lease signing with them. And the rates aren't changing. We're just doing a new lease signing, making sure that we're all in the same understanding of what each roles are. And there has been a lot of verbal arrangements with the previous apartment manager, and we're going to clarify. Okay, these are behaviors that we're going to be continued, and these are behaviors that we're no longer going to do. In fact, I've spent the last 3 days with a very upset resident because one of the things we're discontinuing is we're not going to be changing their light bulbs anymore. And we're not going to be setting up their TVs and their phones however they like that. And I mean, just a lot of these little things that has been a really nice service for them. And they're used to this added value extra service. But again, I can't stress enough, we've lost an employee. And we're all trying to pick up the slack. And as Cody and Steve, as what was mentioned earlier, it's nice like to get a little bit extra money for the extra work that you're doing. But there's only so much you can do. And I had to laugh when Mike was talking about trying to juggle all the balls and keep them all up in the air. I feel like I have a plenty busy job already without all this extra stuff. And I don't know that the money's worth it to me, frankly. And I've only been doing it for 3 days. I care about these people. I want what's best for them. And I think when Sean's talking about the services and things, I hope to be able to be responsive and be able to handle things in a professional manner And I think we can do that. And I think we can increase our level of service on a lot of things. But there are a few little things that are going away. And I mean, these people have been living here for 17 years and don't know how to change the light bulb and don't know how to turn on their TV. And if you, when you guys are trying to figure out if I'm doing a good job or not, please don't go over to the senior center and ask them what they think of me. 'Cause I'm not
You got
popular.
an assisted living rate, it's, $4,800 a month.
And that's the one thing, like some of these lines in the sand you may laugh at, but at some point, like, we are not an assisted living facility and they've got to be able to support themselves. And so some of these things you may laugh and think aren't very big
We
a
were
deal.
cleaning off decks and washing windows and shoveling snow all the way up to their outside deck. Those are some of the things that are not going to happen any longer. And it's a emotional thing. I promise. If Steve hasn't already, he's probably going to hear from people really upset about me. I've been asked numerous times, "Who's your boss? You need to be fired." In the last 3 days, because I told him I wasn't changing the light bulb. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes before the city council or the RDA board at some point too. And the biggest thing for me is just to having support, making sure that we're all on the same page, making sure, because if you want me to change light bulbs, I'll go change light bulbs. Like, it's not worth fighting about. But at the same time, like, we got to be realistic about what we're doing. And if somebody can't change their own light bulb, are we enabling them? If they're supposed to be independently living, like, I don't know. I mean, these are a lot of difficult things to handle and difficult questions to ask, but we're trying to do it the right way. And I appreciate the support, and hopefully y'all won't turn on me when an old lady comes in and tells you how bad I am.
It'll be better at the end. And Sean's guys are picking up some things too. He's been able to squeeze 3 guys in to help us on some of those things. So we have spread it around, but it's going to be different. But it's needed to be done. Chris is a nice guy, and that was part of the reason why we're in this, is because Chris is a nice guy, and we're just not there anymore.
Chris caught me yesterday, caught wind of this because this lady called him because she was so mad about me. And Chris says, "I'm just going to run over after work on my personal time and do it." And I looked at Chris and I said, "You've done enough damage. Get out of the way. I don't want you in that building." Because when you go do that, Chris, I know that he cares and he's such a nice guy, but that's creating an issue for me. You left the job, just stay away, please, because we need to be able to redraw these lines, and it's hard. It's hard to do. So, anyway.
On a little bit of a side note, but it's somewhat related, we just got hit with an audit on that RDA right there. And where that one's so complicated, this has been a little bit scary for us, because when it was done, we did a lot of crazy things over there, and the state's looking at that. Ironically, it was by random draw that they found that one. We had lots of them I would have given to them, but not that one. And so we don't know what's going to come of that either. So I don't know. We got a lot going on over there. That's been way more work than we ever anticipated in many ways. It's been crazy. So we'll see how it turns out. So far it's gone well, and most of the other cities aren't cooperating with them. But we did, and we have nothing to hide, so we'll give them what we got. But
We're still doing it. And remember, you're on YouTube.
Do you know?
Just kidding.
for the audit, you mean?
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Well, we got to comply. We don't have
Some
much
of the stuff's
choice.
hard because they want stuff from 20 years ago. We don't have to keep it. And like, I wasn't here, Mike wasn't here, Steve was barely here. So like, what did we pay for 20 years ago? I don't know.
That's tough.
So our budget really quick. So we don't have any wages over there because we don't have an employee anymore. And that is better because we were doing a ton of work for one RDA employee because it's a totally separate legal entity, different EIN and everything. And so we really don't want RDA employees, especially if we just have one. Professional services, we increased several line items here so that we can pay for stuff where we need to now. We do have that generator in there and $10,000 for blinds in the common areas. And so that's the budget associated with the senior housing facility. Okay, so that's that fund. I can go through the RDAs really quick. If you guys are okay with that, yes. Is that okay? And then are we good to just keep rolling? It's 9:30.
Do people want a break? You want to keep going? Keep going.
Okay. The RDA general fund, this is our catch-all, if you remember, so we can transfer a little bit of money there from the various RDAs, and that's where the interest goes. So you can see it's down with the market. There's our total for the year. You can see our expenditures are really, nothing's changing there. The one thing, we have been using our RDA attorney a lot, and he has saved us a ton. But he's expensive, so you can see we've got that there. We don't know how much we'll use him next year, and we have this professional services line item, so it's okay that might look upside down, but we're fine. And so that's that fund. The Riverdale Road RDA, it's expired, so we're not getting any more money, but we still have some money sitting there, possibly. That's one thing we're working on with the RDA attorney, if you remember from our meeting with Katrubis's and stuff. So we've got some money budgeted there if we're able to use that. Then the 1050 West, this is the RDA area that feeds the senior housing facility. It's also expired, so there's nothing to talk about there. The Weber River RDA fund, that was long ago. There's nothing there. The 550 West RDA area, it expires in tax year 2023, so we've got a couple more years there. You can see this is what we're budgeting for increments, staying the same. We've been averaging slightly more than that. We've got a use of fund balance there. We still, if you remember, we pay increment payments to Boyer, so we've got 2 more years of those, and then we potentially might have a little bit of money left over for some improvements in the 550 West RDA. JC
Penney's.
Oh, okay.
So that's that one. The West Bench, we haven't triggered this one yet, but we must trigger it by 2025. But the more we can get on the ground in that one before 2025, the better. You know, this is the Ted Heap one. That's one that we're actively working on, but we're not anticipating triggering it at this point, so there's no budget associated with it. The Statutory Housing Fund, just a couple little changes there, and just a few expenditures associated with it. It's mainly associated with putting housing back in. And then our last RDA fund is the Housing RDA fund. This is where our housing loans are out of. So you can see the interest is down with the market a little bit. We've got using more fund balance. The reason we're using more fund balance is we might need some new software and stuff to service those loans, or maybe even look at an outside company. Steve's been working on that, and Stacy too. And so we just budgeted a little bit more in case we need something there. So those are the RDA funds. Any questions? I told you I'd be fast. Capital Projects Fund, you can see here's the $1.5 million transfer from the general fund. We've got use of fund balance for our projects, and interest. Interest is down because it's down everywhere. These are our projects. We talked about this in the last meeting. You can see we got some miscellaneous repairs at this facility. Scott might need to encrypt his radio, so we got 20 grand there. Jared needed some equipment for 96,000 and some storage building improvements, if you remember. The community center, this is the gym floor and a furnace replacement. The senior housing facility, we put in 30,000 just because that kitchen's getting old. So if we need to pay for kitchen equipment, and then if you remember, we're budgeting 25,000 for new chairs, and the senior board's going to contribute 10,000, but we had to gross up that transaction, so that's 55,000. And right here in 7,400, we got 100 grand for emergency management projects, maybe generators. We talked about that in the last meeting. We haven't met a ton to talk about that, but we'll work on that. Sean's got 220,000 just to replace the bigger lower Riverdale Park playground. It won't do the other one, but it's just the lower big one, and that's 220,000. And then equipment, we've got some money in here in case we need to make a repair to our comm tower that's up by the water tanks, and then some money for cameras. We've been trying to put those in at the trailheads and stuff where we've had murders and suicides and all sorts of stuff. Anyways, so we got 60 grand there. So that's the Capital Projects Fund. And that's our catch-all, if you remember, and that's kind of where we can put some money and then spend it. So, okay, our water fund, the hot fund of the year, right? This is the one you get to pick on Sean on for sure. I'm not taking the blunt on this one. But so we're budgeting water sales. You can see that's going up slightly. We're proposing a 40% fee increase. and I'll show you why. And then everything else is staying the same. So if you remember, we were doing increases. We were going to do them every year, pass stuff through. We had a couple little increases from Weber Basin, and then COVID hit, and so we didn't do them. And so our assessment, since we did the last fee increases, went up 40%, 39.88%. So we're just proposing to pass that on to our residents. Currently, we have these 3 tiers. And we're proposing that we go to 5 tiers. Now, the reason associated with the 5 tiers is water conservation, as I'm sure you're all very aware, is very hot topic right now. And so we're going to have to do more and more conservation. And so these tiers are really going to help with that conservation. So you can see I've tried to build the rates so we keep that 40% all the way through for the time being. But it'll be really easy in the future that if we want to really crank up some of these upper rates to try and get those water users that are really using excessive water, it will be much easier with that proposal, with these new tiers. So you have any questions about that?
I've heard of 2 cities that have 2-day a week on their restriction.
So what cities would that be?
South Weber and Fruit Heights, they've issued letters.
And Ogden sent out that postcard saying 2 days.
So most of Ogden's on Pineview Water.
Right.
So Pineview Water, their system comes out of Pineview Reservoir. And it's crazy how the water rights work, but depending on where your water right is in the reservoir is what level of water you get. So Pineview Water actually has the lower levels. They have the older water rights in Pineview Reservoir. So even though Pineview Reservoir is only at 50%, guess who owns most of that water that's the 50%? It's Pineview Water. So Weber Basin has water in Pineview, but they own the upper level, so when it's full, they have water in there. But right now at 50%, they per se don't have hardly any water in Pineview. So a lot of that goes back to where your water right is and who the oldest owner is on the water right on how much water you get. So like if you look at most of the northern part of the valley, it's coming out of Pineview and it's serviced by Pineview Water. So they actually have more water right now than Weber Basin has on that side of town. And then if you look at our side of town, we're drawn out of Weber Basin, out of Echo, Lost Creek, East Canyon, Rockport. And if you look at most of our reservoirs up there, most of them are 50% or below. And so that's kind of how that's done. So we don't buy any water from Ogden or from Pineview. All of our water is tied to Weber Basin and what water rights.
Probably South Weber and Fruit Heights would be close to the same.
And I don't know, them are both small cities, so I don't know what they do for water. They might use irrigation water. I don't know if they have secondary or who they're getting their water from. I mean, we can check on that.
Yeah, they said South Weber, they got a letter depending, you're like a Monday, Wednesday user or a Tuesday, Thursday user. Friday, Saturday, Sundays, no water at all, was the letter that I saw.
Yeah, and I like I say, we don't meet with all them. Our main meetings with Weber Basin, we go off. I mean, they can't force us to follow what they ask us to do. They ask us to do it, and then they're going to put a penalty on us if we don't do it. We did fairly well last year. We didn't do great with what we asked people to do. We know from the letters that we're taking out already that we're not doing great right now. And so I don't know where that's going to end up. There is a possibility. I've spoken with Weber Basin every single week for the last month. This weather's been really favorable in April. It's been pretty good in May so far. They're having a board meeting the last Thursday in May to review water levels, snow runoff. The snow runoff to them really hasn't happened yet because it's all upper elevation. So until that last meeting, they don't really know if they can make a change or not. They would love to have the water to tell us to go 2 days a week. But we'll know that the last week in May. And honestly, right now with the weather temperatures and that, our restrictions, people can easily get by with 1 day a week. I mean, I haven't watered my grass at
20
home
minutes.
yet.
20 minutes. No.
Well, okay, let me reword this for the mayor. So the equivalent of 1 day of watering a week, not 1 day per week. So
My phone will start ringing right now.
I know,
if we
I'm
get that
sorry.
wrong. So, I mean,
We've had this discussion
I was
already.
in Home Depot. I was answering emails. I was getting calls. Anyway,
And
20
the other
minutes.
part of that is it's killing our water system as far as revenue. I mean, we have no revenue. So one of the other things that we're going to bring back is a drought rate. That's going to be based on limited amount of water and higher rates during that time. We'll base that off of drought levels based off of what Weber Basin has, so that it'll be tied to a drought level. And if we're at level 1, this is our pricing. If we're at level 5, this is our pricing. And you have to remember, everybody's like, well, we're not getting water, so why are we paying more? But we're not. The water's more or less free to us, right? It falls out of the sky. It's the infrastructure, it's the labor, it's all the stuff like that we're actually paying for. That's a hard cost that doesn't go away. I can sell 5 gallons of water tomorrow. I can say 100,000 gallons of water. My cost really doesn't change. It's just, do we have the water or not? Our aquifers are dropping. So we were basing pumps out of the same aquifer we do, but they pump at a way higher rate. You can watch the water in the well drop. I mean, we're just constantly, every day, where's the level at, and we're 60 feet above our pumps right now. So we have about 35 feet left, and then we're going to be pulling the well again and starting over on dropping pumps and all that fun stuff. So it's a nightmare for us. I mean, honestly, I don't sleep over the water right now. Every call I get is pretty much somehow tied to the water. Everybody's talked about being short-staffed. We're no different. But then throw this drought on. So like right now, we're running just the first 3 or 4 days, we're running 8, 9, 10, 15 notices a day or whatever out on water calls because somebody's watering when they're not supposed to. And it's only going to get worse all summer. So.
And the plan is for your group to do the enforcement?
We don't have anybody else.
No.
So, yeah, we'll do it. But yeah, that's
So-
kind of where we're at.
And we included them in the packet just so you could see them. So what Sean wanted to do is they're tied to the drought rates that Weber Basin's put together. So there's a couple pages in the packet. You can see they have like a normal, advisory, moderate, severe, extreme, and it's based upon their percentage runoff. Then they have what their capacities are, and then they have what their target reductions are. And so then we've built our rates, our drought rates that he'll be bringing to you in the coming future based upon that. So like normal, advisory, moderate, sorry, I've got the wrong term there, and extreme. I think this one's severe. But anyways, and so then these percentage rates are really what you need to look at, because at this level, how we thought it was best is if Weber Basin determines they're in moderate, then this is what rate would prevail, so that they're determining that, not us. They're the experts. And so then it would be a 25% increase in all of our rates. And then if it's moderate or severe, it's 50%. If it's extreme, it's 80. And so that's what our proposal is going to be. But we just wanted to kind of like show you where that was at.
That's included in the packet, right, Cody?
Right. And you guys like to see this, so you can see I've got our rates in here. This was in the packet, the 40% increase. I know you guys like to see where everybody else is. So based upon, and some of them, like they have secondary water, so it's not built that people should use 15,000 gallons. But you can see these are the rates for most of the other municipalities in Weber and Davis County. And you can see we are the lowest at our current rates. Far West is the next lowest. And I know that they're proposing some increases. So with our proposed increases would be second. And I think with Far West increases, they're going to be above us. So would still be the lowest.
That's total. If you look at that, it's in the packet as well as far as.
So it's like water, sewer, and.
Yep. And I've got some other increases we're going to talk about here. You can see the increases as I go across, but we'll talk more about them.
And sorry, which level is this? Like, is this?
This is just
the blue.
This is just normal.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And a lot of other cities around us, like Bona Vista, where I live, they're doing the drought rates, but they're actually doing them. They're more severe. So I think it's like 50, 75, and 100%. So where we don't have secondary, we thought doing a little less was better, and we felt like hopefully that would still allow the water fund to survive too and cover its costs. So for expenditures in the water fund, we got the normal citywide facts. We've got a few increases and decreases, like additional power, additional fuel, water stock increases. These are his special projects, and there's some budget notes there associated with those. Here's his capital projects, some SCADA stuff, water line. We're doing that truck buyback program, so we just put that directly in here again, and then he wants to do a little work to the bathrooms over at the shop. So that's the water fund. And like I said, here's those drought rates. If you want to look at them, the only difference is that should say severe instead of moderate. So I'll fix that. Sewer fund. So once again, Central Weber, their increase is 11.33%. So we're proposing just passing that through to the residents. So currently, so you can see this is what their quarterly billing was. If you remember the last 2 years, it's actually went down slightly, but overall we're up that 11.33%. So this is the current rates. This is our proposed increase. So these would be the new rates for the different connections. And so then Sean's got some increases here to pay Central Weber, a little decrease in equipment needs, and a slight increase in fuel and increase in power for pumping, and then just some capital projects, 300,000 depending on what he determines is most pressing and what other projects he's working on. So that's the sewer fund. Unless you have any questions. Stormwater fund, Sean decided we were okay this year again, and so didn't propose a fee increase in stormwater. There are a few little increases like on the special department expenses. I would say plan on next year, we're probably going to need to do a stormwater fee increase. We haven't done one since it was implemented, and plan on like double. Because if you look back on this fee schedule, everybody else, right here, you can see almost everybody else is double, triple, quadruple what we are, and so it'll probably be around like $4, $5, $6 is probably what we're proposing a month. So just keep that in mind for next year. Let's see, and then the last one, garbage cans. The transfer station's proposing a 9% increase. Our hauler was proposing an 8% increase. So we just decided to do a 9% to make sure that we had a little room because garbage cans have went up a ton and everything else. And fuel surcharges, who knows what's coming. So we've got a 9% increase in revenues there. Would be the new charges, the new charges on those. And then you can see we just have increases in the hauler, and this is for garbage cans. And then we just got the citywide facts. So that's the garbage expenses.
Just garbage cans alone are up almost $20 a piece in the last 9 months.
So
they're made out of plastic and oil, and I mean, it's just. Okay, so motor pool. So if you remember, this is basically like our vehicle leasing fund, if you will. So we're charging the other funds $403,000 for their vehicles. We've got some interest and some proceeds from the sale of assets.
Quick thing. Some of the other cities are turning over their admin vehicles every year right now because used vehicles are worth so much. They're actually turning a profit on them. Right. You can actually get the new ones. I don't know if we want to look at anything like that or.
So if the vehicles that we showed in there, we're trying that right now with 2 of our vehicles.
Okay.
The problem with it in some of the instances is like, me and the chief have talked about it extensively. If you have to put a lot of equipment in a vehicle, it doesn't work because you have a huge expense in putting the equipment in. It leaves holes when you take it out. We're trying it on 2 trucks right now, and if it works out like it's supposed to, they're guaranteeing us at least our purchase price, or we have the option to sell it outright. So if the market's that good, we could sell it above what we purchase it for, but they pretty much did us a guaranteed buyback. In them trucks, we put a toolbox in them and a bed liner, and we're just using them. We're not putting much in them so that we don't have to tear anything out. And this will be our first year to see if it works. We might expand it. And the chiefs, I know he would like to do it if he can figure out a way to do some of the admins that you don't have to use as many lights and stuff in them that he could get by.
Just something I heard.
But we're trying it, so it's kind of an experiment for us. We've never done that before. It is a little more paperwork because, like with ordering. So like our big truck that we ordered, I don't even know if we're going to see it in this next budget year, and we've had it on order for 9 months now. It might be 2024 before we even see that new plow truck.
Well, I know that works the same way when it's out 2-3 years. You get your purchase price back, and I mean, it's not just a 1-year thing.
So from what the dealers are telling us, we'll do better at a year because we shouldn't have any upfront costs. We shouldn't have any tires. The only thing we really should have in that vehicle is maybe 1 to 2 oil changes. We do them ourselves. So we might put $80 in them, or something like that over that year. So it should work out. I mean,
And you guys do what you want. I'm just passing that on. That's something they were all like, oh, we're turning them over every
And
year.
like Roy Water has been doing that for years, like 10, 15 years. And yeah, a lot of times they either use a truck for free or make a little bit of money, or it costs them next to nothing. But
we'll kind of let you know how that works. Like I said, I think we're only into them trucks about 4 months now. We have to order again in 2 months so that we'll have them at the end of the year. And hopefully we come out even or better than even.
So then these are the equipment that we're buying. So a couple Parks trucks, a new truck or a new Tahoe for Shawley, that big truck that Sean was just talking about, 5 unmarked vehicles for the police, and then 2 new vehicles for community development. And so that's the $750,000. And then the last one, the IT fund. So same kind of thing. This is the offset for the IT services. This is largely like the fund that I manage, where I'm over IT. So we've got like the support and maintenance. This is like we pay about $25,000 a year to Cassell for support. We're paying ETS a monthly amount. So that's largely software licensing and support that we're paying for there. Various other things. And then we got $125,000 in equipment. If you remember, a big chunk of that's the police laptops, and hopefully they'll be cheaper than that. But that is a worst case scenario based upon the quote we got. And then we're replacing a couple of copy machines that are 15 plus years old. So that is the budget. Or budgets. Does anybody have any questions?
Was that Sean's whole presentation? You didn't ask for people. You didn't say how it's going.
So like I said, our biggest thing this year is water. I mean, it's driving us crazy, and I know it's going to drive you guys crazy, and you're going to get tons of calls. Believe us, we're doing our best. I mean, we're going to do everything we can to get them as much water as we can. We're on the phone begging for more water every week. Hopefully that changes. It gets better. We're short-staffed too. I mean, we're still at what we was whatever time ago. And I mean, honestly, this would never work if it wasn't for this group of people right here. Because you can't go to another city that everybody will give and take to make sure that everybody's whole at the end of the day. And it just doesn't happen. I mean, I have friends, I have family that work in other cities, and it's a culture where I'm taking whatever I can get. I'll take as much as I can get. I don't care. I'm going to build my little kingdom over here. But every one of these guys has struggled. You know what I mean? You can see it on the days they have a bad day. They're like, and everybody always accuses government of being overstaffed and all that. I just don't think this city's that way. I think we've done more for less for the last, 16 years. I mean, I've been through the good. I remember when I started here, we had so much tax money. It was like, what do we do with all this tax money? You know, they hired people. You just threw money at everything. When your dad was here and that all changed, it went totally backwards. I mean, we kept cutting people, and we're like, we're losing a guy here. I don't even have an office staff in my building anymore. I mean, there's not a secretary in there. There's nobody to answer the phones. When we leave, we lock the door and we go on. I mean, we've done that. We've got by, but you're going to have to make a choice on what level of service you want to provide here quickly too, and decide, where you want to be. Yeah, we keep doing what we're doing. I think as a city we do a dang good job. I think we have dedicated people, and some of that falls back to the council and mayors in the past because they've taken good care of the people. I mean, the people that have worked here have been appreciative Randy Daly was here 35 years. You don't stay at a place that don't take care of you for 35 years. You know, I've been here, I don't know, way too long now, but you just don't stay at a place. You know, there's plenty of jobs out there that you don't have to stay here if you don't want to stay here and you haven't been treated well. But it's hurting. I mean, like right now we're down a guy, and that's not a lot to a lot of people, but if you only have 10 guys and you're down one, that's a tenth of your staff. We put out, 2 weeks ago, we put out applications. I've had 3 people apply. One guy put in, he wants $3 more than the top of the scale. The other guy wants the top of the scale, and I've got one guy that I can possibly interview in 2 weeks. That's the application I have, is one. So somewhere it's going to break.
So you're not asking to add because you don't think anyone will apply?
Honestly, I don't think I don't know if I can fill the position. My brother's at South Ogden. He's the assistant director up there. They've had at least 2 to 3 positions open for over 6 to 9 months now. You just can't fill them, you know. And we're all in the same boat. Everybody's scales based off everybody around us scales. One of our big things right now is what the construction industry's doing, because them's the same guys, right? So this last guy I lost, he took a $7 increase to go work construction. I mean, and they're paying benefits now. They didn't used to pay benefits. You know, they've got health insurance now. They're giving them days off. They're putting in a 401k. So, you know, when we have a chance, someday we'll need to add to, especially with the developments coming if we do these big buildings and that. But we feel like we're pretty good right now. You know, we get by. There'll be some stuff like if the state ever presses hard on stormwater and that, we'll have to add there to meet the programs perfectly. But I don't know. Like I said, we're kind of in the same boat as everybody else. I just appreciate working with all these guys and that we all make it work at the end of the day. And I know you can sense the frustration. You know, they're frustrated. But at the end of the day, they'll still make it work for you. I know they will. So. And then I guess the main thing I wanted to ask is, do you guys have anything that you see that we're not doing? As you know, you guys are out there on the streets, you're taking the beatings. If there's something that we're not providing that we should be, we'd like to know. So that's about all I have. It's been a great place to spend my career here, and I trust you guys will make the right decisions because you always have. So. Any questions, or can we? And the rate increases, we tried to do that where we was trying to move them along, but with that stupid COVID, nobody wanted to really touch on that when everybody was hurting. So they're a little bit higher, but they're pretty much, if you look through that, they're well below market in our area. I mean, we strive to keep our rates super low and still have a good system. So I hope you can back that up. If you have questions or people come to you, feel free to reach out and we'll try and explain to them why or where we're at.
Braden's got that. Mayor's Corner.
Yeah, I have to be careful because
below market. That's what you
Put it
said.
out there.
That's a good one. Write that.
Well below market. Yeah, I'll write that down.
Yeah, I got to be careful. I crossed the line with him last week with my wording on the Facebook post.
It wasn't you. It wasn't
I'm in trouble there, but it took some heat. So, no questions. Thanks, guys.
Okay, everybody good? We ready to keep them all moving? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we need a little break. Let's take a break.
I just want to say real quick,
5 minutes.
because he was offering a compliment, I just want to say that just as he said we're doing a good job making decisions and that he trusts us, I just want to say that, I can't speak for everyone, but I definitely appreciate all the decisions that all of you make, and I definitely trust you in your positions as well in the decisions you make. So thank you for informing me, especially of all of these things. So thank you.
Newbies.
That's it. You need to thank them too, Alan.
I do.
Can I take a break?
I
Are we not done?
Yeah, we're taking this little break because we got to have our property tax discussion.
Oh, I thought we were done. I thought I could mic drop on that, but
And
I
then
guess not.
discussion on future budgets and economic outlook. We're just over halfway.
So in all this
good.
stuff, all these fee increases, do they still have to get, are they just passed as part of the budget, or do we have to do it individually? I thought you were very conservative on your water rates. I thought you were nice on it. People are lucky I'm not the one setting the rates on water.
Midnight snack. So what's two-sided though, because we don't have secondary.
Yeah.
You were so mean. Oh, I wish I had something to throw at you. That's it. Throw a cookie.
I don't know.
There's 12 of you right now, or just 11?
So what do we have? 3, 4.
Wait, you want to see something?
I
They're
think
just
with
having a
me
break.
there's 11.
11? And do you guys like Ruby River for lunch? Or would you like something else?
No,
Just the cash.
Chick-fil-A there, did you?
we're good.
That wasn't the question.
I know. You can't dodge that.
Right here.
That wasn't the question at all. I was talking about property.
I can't eat Chick-fil-A, but that's my
This is
Oh, I love it. I
first
can't
year
eat
to
it.
be an elected official, and people pay attention to all of these because it's everything.
Deep fat fried
And property tax is
is
huge.
just,
But we are so low, ridiculously low on everything. Like the commercial sewer should be like
doesn't matter. I mean,
100 times what it is right now. Yeah.
hiatal hernia,
Or
acid
stormwater,
reflux,
I mean.
all the
Wait, is there
age-related.
like a second
Just
dinner?
it's,
Are we on to second dinner? You want my chips?
You don't want
No, I didn't feel like crunchy today.
Oh my goodness, these are like overly crunchy.
Yeah, I could hear people eating them.
vegetarian, although I
I
do
was like,
fish, but
they're like-
I don't think
cannot
so.
be deep fat fried. Absolutely.
I have to be at work so early tomorrow for drug court.
Can't you just watch it, or do you have to?
Yeah, it's
I
okay.
don't know.
I mean, I'll take it
quit
home, I'll
making
give it to the
comments.
kids or whatever.
I want to be like, I'm really glad to see there's no retirement
I mean, it's
in his
fine.
account.
Wait, what?
He's over 30 years, I think.
No, I know you would. That's that's not the point.
Yeah, like there wasn't a retirement in his salaries.
Anyway.
Like he could have retired a long time ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be a disaster for the city.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So I'm glad. I'm glad he seems good for at least one more year. Unless he does what the other guy did, walks out. I would have done that. That would have been fun. It's like everybody's dream. Like it was like a big incident happening over by the Pig Lady Farm subdivision. What's that called? River Glen. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm not dealing with it." Put his keys down. He's like, he walked home. I retired.
He gave
Yeah.
like his keys to the car or whatever.
Yeah, walked home. It was when the river was backing up into the subdivision because they installed the storm outlet too low in the river. So when the river was flooding at flood level, it was backing up into people's houses.
Oh my goodness. Who's that on?
Everybody. Probably mostly the city at that point because it was like well past when it was built.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was nuts. People forget it's a flood area.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was every spring that the Pig Lady Farm.
Still broadcasting the
Oh, it is? Can you hear it?
No, I just got a text.
The Pig Lady Farm? Do you remember how when it used to be flooded over there by the storage sheds all the time? You almost couldn't get to the house.
On the other
Oh, I
side.
do.
On the other side.
When we built down there, there was a lake back there.
Thank you, Cody. You couldn't get to it.
Well, if you drive along and you look to the freeway side, there's standing water right now. Like that's why there's those phragmites have grown. Right now along the freeway side of Parker, there's standing water right across in that lot. Well, there's a storm drain that goes out through the property out of the river, but
Right, because
I mean, and also around that sign, it's a wetland right there. It might be, but it probably fed the lake that was there, you know?
Just text me, yeah.
Right.
He doesn't make that. That's how much it costs.
Yeah. Yeah, there's frogs back there, yeah. Used to be geese landing around there. And yeah. All right, let's see. Are we all pretty much ready to continue?
Okay.
All right, let's
Okay.
reconvene
All right, gotta go.
for the property tax discussion. Cody Carden.
Okay, you're probably sick of me talking. This is why I only get invited to like 2 meetings a year. Just a couple things to add. to, like Sean said, like, so last week I was at my UGFOA conference, like my finance directors conference. And so we're talking to a couple of finance directors, and we're talking about what we manage and stuff. And I'm like, well, I do IT. And they're like, oh, you have somebody under you? I'm like, no, I do IT. And they all started laughing. They're like, well, I don't want your job. And that's literally how like the whole city is, like I don't think there's another finance director in the state of Utah that is the finance director and actively does the IT. And there's people who manage the IT, and that's how the whole city's set up. And as we start talking about property taxes, so I've shown you this sheet before. So keep in mind, like Weber Fire District, plug your ears for a minute, Jared, but let's say they're the experts at providing fire. Okay? They are in the county. It costs them this property tax rate to provide fire. So in all reality, that's what it should cost us to provide fire.
It doesn't include their bond.
Right. Well, I think that does include their bond in that rate. Maybe not though. So in all reality, like there's no way that we get economies of scale that Weber Fire District doesn't have, that we get away with charging a cheaper rate. It's because we're not providing the same level of service is a lot of what it comes back down to. And so you can see here's our historical rates. You can see what the rate pencils. If you remember, just going over stuff. So our property tax rate guarantees us amount of money. It does not. So as inflation goes up and home values go up, then our rate drops. So you can see that's what happens every year. If you remember, every year at this meeting, Roger would make a joke that like, I'm just going to run it to zero, because in effect, like this year, home values are projected to go up or have went up supposedly like 35%, right? So in theory, our property tax rate should drop 35% to get the same amount of money. So that's what this is showing. So then going down here, what we've tried to show here is like normalize things. So yes, West Haven doesn't have a property tax, but they pay Weber Fire for their fire. And so because of that, their combined rate between no city sale tax and paying Weber Fire is 0.001269. Our tax rate is 0.000843. So we're third cheapest property tax rate. And the reason that, and if you look at one is Plain City, they have a volunteer fire department. That's why theirs is cheap. And from what I've heard, and I live right next to Plain City, it's not a very good volunteer fire department. 2 is Uinta. Once again, they have a volunteer fire department. 4 is Huntsville. Oh, did they just switch? Okay. And then Huntsville, I believe Huntsville, do they use Northview? So you can see like our company right there. So in effect, what I would say, so I know like Steve's predecessor from before used to always say like, okay, we need to compensate the residents for putting up with what's on Riverdale Road. Well, I would say that we are not charging the residents enough. And that's been the case for a long time. We're putting a lot of burden, and not burden, but like we're utilizing what we're getting from sales tax very effectively, but we're not making the residents really pay their equal share, or the businesses either, because they're paying it in sales tax, but they're not paying it in property tax. Because in all reality, we should probably be somewhere in the middle here. And if we're in the middle, that's what our property tax would be. And that's what our average proceeds would be, somewhere in this range. And like I said, Councilor Stevens and the mayor put this on the agenda. So I worked with Steve and we just threw some stuff together. If this is different than what you're envisioning, we can talk about it at the end. I just thought this was good conversation starters. So just as a way of refreshing too, like you see this up here and you're like, I pay way more than $84 in property tax. Well, if you remember, you pay to a whole bunch of different entities. So this is one of your houses from 2021. And so in reality, like I think the total property tax bill was about $3,000 or $2,500. And you can see of that, you're only paying Riverdale $145. The rest of it was going to the school district, the county, the mosquito abatement district, whoever the case may be, but the city's only really gathering that much. So when we say like we're doubling our property tax rate, it's only doubling like $145. It's not doubling the $3,000. So I was trying to find something, and the county doesn't do a very good job of providing something. So I use Zillow to illustrate the next point, but like home values. So you can see, and they provide this chart, and if you Google this, you can find it. And so home values are set as of January 1st. So, for example, so say you're building a house, and as of January 1st, only the footings had been poured, your assessed value for the whole year would only be based upon having the footings. Or if like, and so every January 1st is what that value is based upon. So what I did is I put together this next sheet. Where is it? Right here. And so based upon that Zillow, it kind of gave me the estimated typical home values for the various years. And so then you can see what our tax rate was. And so you can see, depending, and I'm probably off a tiny bit there, but you can see like the same house is paying about $153. Because if it's your primary residence, you get a 45% deduction. So you're only paying 55% of the assessed value. And so you can see my guess is that somewhere around there, if this is what the county valued this house at, that's about what our certified tax rate would be, is drop into that. So say we want $100,000 more in property tax. That would make our rate approximately this. The total amount that pay the city would be $181. So it would go up $21. So monthly it'd be $1.78 increase. So if it was $250, it'd be $4.40 a month. If we want $750,000 more in property tax, it's $13 a month, and then if we want $1.5 million, it's $27 a month. So, like if you keep in mind like 10% inflation, like there's a lot of costs. Everybody's anticipating that everything's going up this year. It really is a pretty good time to look at doing some of these things. You can see this chart. What this shows is all the cities around us and what they're doing with their property taxes. So you can see this one is, I believe this is Roy. So you can see when they go through truth and taxation that it goes up. And what a lot of cities have done, and then you can see, if you care, how much money other cities are generating in property tax. So Pleasant View has about the same number of residents as us. They have a way smaller police force, but you can see they gather about $150,000 more in property tax a year than us. You can see where North Ogden and some of them are. And then a lot of the cities around us, they've went to the model where they increase their property taxes every year. This one's wrong. Ogden did their last increase in 2018. But you can see most of the cities around us, like we are the oldest one. And I think we actually did one little bump in 2010, but it only made like $2 difference. So in all reality, the last time we had a significant property tax increase was 2007. And you can see all the other cities around us have been doing it much more frequently. And that's because we've lived off our sales tax. And we've degraded positions a lot of times so that we could continue to live off that when we probably should have been increasing property taxes. So we haven't built an increase. We haven't built anything into the budget. But if you want to keep employees, and if you want to add employees, it really needs to come through property taxes. And I know Scott talked about, well, you issued this new tax, we should use it. If you listen to Fred Philpott's discussion, the thing he said at the very end was, do not spend this money on reoccurring items or you're going to be in really bad shape in 2030. That's the worst thing we could do right now, is implement that tax that we did here a little while ago and start using it on reoccurring items and commit it, because then the hole's just going to be that much bigger and we're going to have less tools to fill it. So if we want to do some of these things that the chiefs were talking about and stuff, it really needs to come through property tax. So the question is when. I would say it's not an if, it's a when. I personally feel like this year is a pretty good year to do it. I know there's not a great year to do it, but if you think about it, it's not an election year. everything is going up. So it's very, like everybody's anticipating increases. It's not, depending on what level you chose to do, it's not going to be a huge increase. I mean, even if we held our rate this year, which wouldn't probably be my preference, but it would allow everybody to see. And like in talking to South Ogden, so South Ogden, if you look at this, they actually have a higher property tax now than Ogden City. And it's because Ogden City was doing truth and taxation like every other year, and then during COVID they stopped, and South Ogden's been doing it every year. So the first year they had a lot of people show up, and then the next year they had like half, and then the next year they had like 3 people show up, and now they're to the point that they do truth and taxation every year and nobody shows up because everybody's just so accustomed to it. And honestly, for a 2030 plan, the sooner we start doing property tax, even if we don't do huge increases, and kind of get our residents trained on that, it's going to be a lot easier in 2030 because they're going to know what the process is. They're going to expect it. And not that we want to, like blow it out of the water and hire a ton of new people. But I think there's needs that the city has, and I think you've heard that tonight. And so it's kind of like when and what you guys want to do, not if and how. But I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know if you're thinking something totally different. I don't know. That's just kind of what we had thrown together.
One thing, South Ogden does do that truth and taxation every year, and they said they don't even necessarily raise the rate every year. They just hold the hearing so that they have the option of.
They hold their rate. So they're to the point now that they just hold their rate. So what that does, so like if you look at this, so like our rate dropped from 0.00921 to 0.00848, and that may not seem like a lot of money, but it is. And it helps us. It's almost like an inflationary adjustment because we actually lose buying power every year, right, by our inflation. And so by holding that rate, you're basically building like a little inflation amount into it. So
if we want to move forward, do we need to get it on a city council real agenda for action?
So in the packet is this little gem here at the very end, and this is kind of the schedule for truth and taxation, and it's something I've never done either. I haven't ever worked for an entity when truth and taxation happen. So we need to decide on or before June 22nd, and the sooner we decide, the better, because then we can let the county and everybody know that we're doing it. And then we have to put out some notices. We have to hold different hearings, and it's really wonky. You actually don't approve your final budget until about August 17th because you do these different hearings throughout the summer. And so then you actually operate for like almost 2 months without a budget, and then you adopt your budget in August. But it's how they've set up the process and to meet the timelines and stuff. So my only fear of like waiting another year is then it is an election year, and there are a lot of people saying, hey, the end of the year there's a recession looming, and not that we want to be like doomsday or anything, but like if we get to next year and we really need to do an increase and it's a recession, how much harder is it going to be? Where right now, you go to the grocery store and it's like, holy cow, last week this was $2, now it's $4. Like, what happened? And so anyways, that's kind of my thoughts and where we're at and things. Do you have any questions? From me, anybody else? Anything you want to add?
I might just add one part of that, and this is part of the long-term strategic planning. We've got a little bit of an idea we want to run with, and I don't know where it'll go, but it's an option. But one of the things I think we keep running into is that chart that Cody showed, and we don't get a lot of sympathy around the county or even around the state, even from the league to some degrees, because they look at that property tax and how low we are, and they just say, why should we feel sorry for you? I mean, that's the response we get. And so, and that wouldn't be the reason why we would do it, but it does say something, and it's a little bit concerning, and it ties our hands a little bit because we are so low. They just don't feel sorry for us because they look at their own and say, you guys must just be flowing in cash. And it's this perception that Riverdale has developed over the years. I don't know how many times I told that story last week in the meetings in St. George, And people just don't understand our unique situation. And it is very unique, but we have been very fortunate to be able to keep our property tax so low. But I think those days are over. We just can't afford to do it anymore. And you've heard all these, department heads talk tonight, and we've got to start adding some people. And this is one of the ways we can do that. We've got to start hiring, and we've got to start making some changes. And this would bring some money in, but we could do it. So, I mean, there's a number of factors. It's a pretty complicated process, the whole thing. I mean, it plays out everywhere. But I think we've sat here for so long that we just don't have choices anymore. You got to start doing something.
To be honest, if we didn't have the 2030 thing, I wouldn't. I mean, we've got some needs, but I wouldn't feel quite as much pressure. But I think the 2007 for our last increase is as bad a look as anything. And if we didn't need some support from other, entities, I'd just say, well, yeah, we don't have to raise our taxes. We're 2007 and we hold the line and we're awesome. But I think we're going to have to build some support and kind of a coalition to help us. And that number, that 2007, just looks horrible. It just looks bad. We just haven't touched our taxes.
When it was brought up, probably a couple of years ago when Roger was around, we need to start looking at some of these things, and it comes up every year. But I'm not a fan of the franchise tax. I think it's underhanded, less than honorable, but yet there was such a giddiness about, we got to get it passed before people know what's happening. And I just thought, no, you do the property tax increase, because that's where you get the truth in taxation. If we can go through the process and still not raise it, but at least incrementally increase it, start increasing it, because like I said, that 2007 is just a black eye. And this is area that has got to be addressed. And if not now, there's no good time, but now is as good as any.
And I would say that it wasn't that we had to hurry and get it done before people found out what we were doing. It was that we had spent years trying to educate everybody on the council, and we don't get it done, we're just going to be starting back over, kicking the bucket down the road. It's kind of like this, starting over again and trying to keep it moving. And kind of as the mayor alluded, you look at this chart. So we go to the legislature and say, hey, our local option sales tax is going away. Pass a new bill and bail us out. And they're going to say, okay, well, what's your property tax rate? When did you last increase it? How are your utility fees? And they're going to look at us and say, we've given you a whole list of tools and you don't use any of them. See ya. Go use what you have. And you can laugh or say, oh, yeah, whatever. That won't happen. They'll bail us out. I don't think it's going to happen this time. I think we've got to at least do our part to get stuff where we're comparable. And then maybe we have a chance at getting some support. But...
Okay, I'm going to totally 180 degrees disagree with you. Yeah, we got to do our part, but if you talk to the negative Nellies at the league, they're going to say no. But in some of the areas I've talked to and people I've bounced this off, it's not going to happen before 27, but it'll happen, I believe. Now, you believe opposite, that's fine. I'm optimistic, but still, we got to do our part.
Right. So when?
And another thing about it is, it's not like we're looking at doing it for something frivolous. I mean, we had some impassioned pleas for public safety tonight, for help in our departments. It's just not, I don't think it's a frivolous thing. And it's hard for me to sit here and recommend that we increase taxes. It goes against everything I believe in, to be honest. I mean, I hate it, to be honest. I hate sitting here saying we need to increase our taxes. I'm living it every day right now. I see it, I hear it, I know what's going on, and it's just, I guess you just have to do it every now and then, as much as I hate it.
So the only thing I would say is the first year is going to be painful. It is. So you got to decide, is it worth just holding the rate? Or is it worth gaining some ground to make some of that pain and effort worth it? Do you want to take care of some of these guys out here? Like, what do you want? Like, what feels right? What do you want?
We need to decide the rate right now, or can we just start
No,
the process?
tonight's actually just a discussion item, so that's all we can do about it. But we'll set a first meeting and get rolling on it. I mean, I think we need to have some discussion one way or another. And I don't know, Cody, if you want to pull that chart back up that showed the difference, whether we went the higher amounts or the lower amounts and whatnot. Cody and I had kind of talked about this a little bit and just looked at that as a number, saying, well, if we're talking about adding, 2 police officers and a fireman, I mean, and we started looking at all these things, then where do we fall in, and our mindset at that point was somewhere the 250 to 750 range, whether it's one of those or in between them or something in that part, just to try and generate that amount of money, because that's realistically what it's going to cost us. And the more of that we have, the more of these needs we can fill if we've got money. So that was just where we were throwing. I mean, we didn't set on anything, but it was somewhere in that ballpark. I think the 100,000 probably a little low, but where we go beyond that, that's your call. But I don't think those increases are huge. I mean, if you're looking at a $5 increase to generate 250,000, that's pretty minimal. And even at $13 to generate a 750, we can get some things done with 750,000. And it's not a huge burden on your citizens. I mean, that's kind of where I was at. I was leaning more towards that one. And I'm like Braden. I mean, I'm a tightwad. You can ask these guys. They joke about me going to the DI all the time, That's just the way I am. But I see our needs, and I'm concerned because we've got to do some stuff. We can't keep sitting on our hands and, kicking a can down the road. We got to move.
And just one thing to show you. So like we said, it doesn't matter. But so it's 750. I'm just projecting, this is a rough number, something I just threw together. So I'm not saying this is exactly what it'd be. But 0.001698. So if you put that up here and you look at where that puts us really close to Far West. And Far West in ranking is 7th, and we'd actually be slightly under that. So I don't know how many there is here, 14, but then we've got a couple doubled up. So that'd put us in the middle, like middle bottom, even jumping $750,000.
Okay, just a second.
So
Rank on the far right is...
So it combines it. So it's kind of weird. So this ranks it by just city. Then this adds in if they have an outside fire provider, and then this gives a combined rate between the city and the fire. And so then this ranking is with, I was trying to make apples to apples.
Okay, so like West Haven contracts for fire and police.
Right. But we all pay the county for policing in effect. It doesn't matter. Like I live in Far West. So I have the sheriff provide my policing, but my property tax rate to the county isn't any different than yours because we pay the county the same. It's kind of like the school district. Like you may not have a kid that goes to school, but you pay the school district property tax, right? And so there's no difference in who the police provider is, but in effect, this rate should be higher if the city's paying for police. So like if you look at Roy, who provides both police and fire, you can see their property tax rate is 0.001733. And so that's, like probably more where we should be because we're providing both those services.
So the rank on the far, in that column, on the far right is what, third from the top or third from the bottom?
A third from the bottom. We're the third lowest. And if you remember, Plain City's lower and they got a volunteer fire department, and Uinta was lower and they had a volunteer fire department and then just switched to the county. And so like that shows you that we're super low right there where we should be more in this range. And so you can see like that 0.001698 or whatever it was, like just looking at the smell test, like that's probably a pretty decent place for us to be. And then like if we looked at like holding that rate and seeing where we were at, and then come 2030, if we needed to maybe for a year or two do a couple little bumps to get us to where we needed to be, like that would probably be a fairly methodical place to be.
And having the rate would be truth and taxation every year.
It is. I wish the state would change it so that if you're doing it every year and just holding the rate, that it's like a simplified truth in taxation, so you didn't have to go through the whole process. But that's not how it is. It's all or nothing. So that would cost residents approximately $13.37.
It's essentially a double. It's a doubling of our tax rate.
It would
right?
almost double. Yep,
So
or it'd be pretty close. Yeah,
so
double.
We're gonna get dragged through the media for 100% tax increase.
Right. So we would have to do a ton of publicity and say, hey, look, like, yeah, our rate's doubling, but in effect, it's not, you're not going from $3,000 in your escrow account to $6,000. You're paying the city $145. And so it's going to $290. Like we'd have to do a ton of that.
Towards public safety.
And it's public safety. You're getting a policeman and a fireman or whatever it is out of it.
Because I live in Syracuse. They've doubled their property tax 2 years in a row, and it's all been based around police and fire. There wasn't one person who showed up at the council and argued it. But what they did is they went out and they advertised it. They publicized what they were doing, why they were doing it, way in advance, and there was no argument. There was no fight. It's not like we're adding property tax to go get a luxury item. So that's what, just coming from a residence in an area that did have their property tax doubled 2 years in a row. I mean, they went up $1.4 million in 1 year. It's kind of crazy, but.
I agree. I don't think any.
So do we need like a consensus to put on an agenda?
Councilor Arnold had a question. So did Karina.
So, like I've said, I'm in favor of this just because of the public safety aspect, as long as it goes on the public safety aspect. But the one thing that I wanted to say, and just as we deal with the example is Lynette. Lynette went away. She wasn't replaced. Her duties were given out, and people got an increase. Then the increase shine wears off, and they're complaining about how much work they do. And the more for less and all that stuff, I can tell you I know, Steve's retired, right? Didn't you retire?
Yes, sir.
So you do less with more. But everybody else, but everybody is doing more with less. I mean, that's just a freaking fact of life. And the thing is, when a stupid decision is made, when somebody leaves and they give the duties away to somebody else, and they give them an increase, and then the luster of the coin goes away, and then they're like, I'm burdened with all this extra work. That's just a dumb decision. When we're talking about FTEs, work that needs to be done, and all that kind of stuff, and then we need money, we hire people. Don't give them away. Don't, keep your budgets the way they're going. Get the money, but the thing with Lynette is, I mean, I can just be by myself on this one, but it's just pure greed. It's like, hey, I get some extra money, I get these duties, and then when that stuff comes around, they're like, you know what? Yeah, this isn't worth it because I'm so bombarded with stuff where, I mean, we get in this situation, and I don't like being in this situation. I've been a proponent of passing the costs on because we say the sewer board, the garbage, all that kind of stuff. I mean, just flow it through. And and not that I care that it's my decision or our decision or, I don't care about taking the heat, but that's an easy phone call to take when you say, that freaking sewer board is ridiculous, or, garbage cans, that's an easy one. This is where water's an easy one this year, like a drought rate. That's an easy one, so, please don't do the stuff like Lynette again. But, this kind of stuff with, 2007 and our property tax, I think it's a no-brainer. It's a really easy sell, and I would fight that fight with my neighbors when they come a calling.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the deal with, say, a Lynette or one of them people, we might have paid somebody else another $1 an hour to take some of that, but we was probably saving $70,000 a year by cutting that position. And at that time, them budgets were so tight That was the difference between the guys that was here getting a raise or skipping a year on their merit raise. That's how tight it was at that time. It wasn't like we could just refill that position. If we refilled that position that year, you told everybody that worked for you, you're not getting a raise this year. It was that tight, and it's been that tight on a lot of them years after that 2007. We would have loved to kept the positions. We gave up positions. The police gave up positions. We didn't pay anybody anywhere near close to what that wage was. It wasn't like somebody got an extra $30,000 a year type deal. It was like maybe, okay, you got a step raise, and we saved $60,000.
And I get that, but I mean, it's tough for me to have any compassion whatsoever. I worked for the federal government.
Yeah.
And we get like 1.4% a year or something like that, when you guys were getting 6. Not saying it's right or wrong, because I honestly think the federal government's probably on the wrong side. But it's tough to take that when, like, for example, my boss, who has 150 employees, makes less than all of you.
Yeah.
So I get it, but
The thing was,
our
couldn't
insurance
keep
isn't
them.
free.
We
I
couldn't
know
keep
yours
them,
isn't
is what
free
I'm
either, but it's
saying,
pretty
is we
cheap.
couldn't keep them with
Yours
the
is
budget.
way cheap. Anyway, just
They had a time and place, but now we need to get you back where you need to be, and
Yeah.
we're all willing to take the hit for it. So
Sure.
we need to make sure everybody can, because it's going to be a win-win. You know, it's going to take the pressure off of the staff, which we want, because we want to keep our staff, and in the end, the residents are going to get the service increase, so, or at least maintained. So it's a win. Yeah,
Yeah,
good
and
point.
I understand, Alan, where you're coming from, and I get that. But please tell your people how much we appreciate them sucking it up. All the sucking up they've been doing since 2017. I mean, we've made do, and good for you. Okay, so sounds like we kind of want to have a discussion about that on an agenda, whatever the process is.
I assume we have a consensus on that. then.
Was there a drop dead date? Would it say June, 22nd?
So we have to decide for sure by June 22nd, because June 22nd is the last day you can adopt your final budget, but our last meeting is June 21st. However, the county will want to know well in advance of that.
Okay, so what's the process? We get on the next agenda, then we can.
So we can put it on the next agenda. You guys need to probably think about it a little bit, and like, where do you feel comfortable? And maybe we need to look at it and say, okay, like, say we go with the 750. What does that get us? You know, like,
Do
does
we have
that
to
get
decide
us?
the rate
Hard to know.
at the same time?
where we're gonna go.
Well, in effect, we kind of have to, because we have to put that in the budget. So like,
I got it.
The thing
I got
is, there has to be like a major campaign within the next 2 weeks if it's gonna be on the next agenda. So I mean, it's gotta be like Facebook, because we can't wait for the corner, the mayor's corner. I mean,
It's
we'd have
out.
to
It's
put
coming out
something on
this week.
Facebook and share it a bunch and just say, you know, I mean, one, you can't, I don't think you can quantify the police safety as easily as you can with the fire. When you're saying you got one guy going in, you know, when you say, you know, we don't have a guy going, period, you know, there's a stabbing victim, we don't have a guy going.
I've got times when I've got one guy on duty
So,
still.
so I mean, that kind of stuff should be part of the story.
Yeah.
And say, you know what, because I don't wear a gun to work. I mean, that's one of the things about me as a federal employee. I don't wear a gun to work, or I don't run into a fire. You know, we don't even have fire extinguishers at my work anymore because they just say, if there's a fire, you walk out. And it's like, it's this little teeny tiny fire. It doesn't matter. Walk out, let it burn, you know? So, I mean, I have some perspective of what I do for a living compared to other people, but I think selling it to the residents with Mayor's Corner when it comes out, maybe that's a post thing, but Facebook and anything we can do to say, you know what, this is gonna happen and this is why.
Yeah, we can get together.
You know, there's a lot of areas
Call
that
Marty,
police
yeah.
can quantify, just like fire can quantify, that, anyway, I hear about all the nuances, so you know,
But
Well-
maybe don't advertise when people should come and commit crime in the city when there's only one guy on shift.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And I think one of the things, everybody seems to be kind of in favor of this, and I think that would be one thing that would be really nice if we could be united as a city government and not have somebody that's kind of dragging our own legislative body or whatever through the mud. You know, I mean, you guys are all individuals, you do whatever you want, but I think that would be very helpful if we were all united on it, to be honest, because none of us actually wants to have to do something like this.
Okay, I wanted to have this discussion weeks ago.
Right.
So can I just add one thing? So to Counselor Stevens' point, so say we decide we're hiring, I don't know, like say we say 2 firemen and 2 police. So we come up with a budget amount. And then what we would do is we actually submit to the county, we request an amount of money. So say that we're getting 750,000 now, and we say we need another 750,000. So we would put in that request, and then they would determine the rate based upon our request for XYZ.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's go big.
So, and then we would add that to the budget and increase like our property tax line item, and then increase any of the other line items. So like in my example, would increase police wages and benefits for their police, and then fire for those benefits too.
But
So
isn't the point of the public hearing to adjust that rate according to public pressure?
right.
So we have to
Well, to be
decide-
transparent about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But does the law not give us leverage to set the real rate after the public hearings?
Yeah, we can. And so, but basically, I guess what I'm saying is we really determine the amount of money we want, and then the county sets the rate. So, and we've just got to justify how we're using it in the budget. So, and then one other thing, like on Lynette's position, we ended up with all these weird positions that were almost created for employees. And so they were like this culmination of like all these different job functions that aren't really related. And so like, we're going to have another one of those with Randy. Like if Randy retires, are we going to be able to find somebody else who does code enforcement and fire marshal and works in code community development?
You know
So
what?
like,
That's
like,
exactly right. There was that I looked at the job descriptions on some of these when they got put in. It was like they were created for that one person's skill set.
they were, and that's why it's so hard to replace a Lynette, because how do you find a Lynette that can do, there's not one. And so like,
Jill has several friends.
so anyways, so that's where a lot of that was really difficult. But going forward, we're going to have to pull apart a bunch of those, because it's going to get harder and harder to ask people to do more with less. And there's just more requirements, right? The state keeps beating us up with audits on RDAs that existed 20 years ago. So anyways,
Okay, we do want to be very, very proactive with the messaging, and so it'll be all hands on deck for that, and yeah. Okay, we ready to move on to the next item?
Cody, you got more on the future budgets and economics?
no. And so we will try and like keep these things in front of you and keep stuff moving, and try and bring you increases as they come, just like you were talking about with like Central Weaver, so we can just pass them through as they come. So we've had,
We already passed that, didn't we? I mean, if sewer goes up, it passes.
well,
through.
we've adopted that model, but we kind of still have to do it every year. We have to go through the hoops, but we'll try and do that with everything is our plan.
Is part of our problem is, like, I have a neighbor that has a mind like a steel trap, and he says, you know, the council said, well, we're gonna keep water rates low and not put secondary water in. And then years later, we have a water fund that has to support itself. So, I mean, it's contrary to what was said by the previous councils. And then, I mean, once a month, he tells me something about Home Depot. Home Depot said they would never sell anything from their yard. When they came to this meeting, they said, we're gonna build a Home Depot and we will never sell anything from our yard, from the parking lot. And so he's constantly over. Have you seen their parking lot? I wasn't at the meeting. I don't know. You know, so I mean, there's things that we need to be forward thinking about and not strap ourselves in with some of this stuff where, you know, because Home Depot's a distribution center. They're not just selling out of there. They're a distribution center, and Our parking lot it's down now, but it was crazy. But anyway,
Okay.
sorry.
We didn't take a consensus on that. I saw a lot of head nodding,
Okay,
but I'm
consensus
assuming
to
we're
put
okay
this
on
the
that.
agenda. Like everybody good with that? Okay, looks like everybody good. Karina, okay, good. Yeah.
I guess, Cody, you got anything else? Maybe just in closing, Mayor, if I could, I don't know if anybody else feels like they've been sucking on the fire hose tonight. I mean, I know we hit you with a lot of stuff, but this has been going on for quite a while. We've been in tons and tons of meetings. All kinds of stuff has been going on, and I've been leaning on these guys. You know, being the new guy, my little budget in there didn't involve near this stuff in the past, and so you can see why I did too, because you see how quality of individuals we have, and they do a phenomenal job, to be honest with you. So I thank them. And then Cody, I don't know that I could even say enough for what he does, and there's a reason why he's there. And one day we'll get the IT away from him and just let him focus on this stuff, you know. But these guys are amazing, and so my thanks to them and to you guys. You've supported us over the years, and we're going to have some tight years. It's going to be a challenge. There's no question, but I think this group is up for it. We're ready, and we can support you. We'll provide you with what you need, but it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a challenge, but I think in the long run, Riverdale's going to be a lot better because of it. And you know, you guys are going to have to shoulder that, but I think everybody will appreciate when they see what we end up with at the end. So thanks for understanding and helping us and supporting us, and thanks to my team, because they're just as good as they come. So thank you.
Agreed. Okay. And I could say a bunch of stuff, but I think we probably all want to go home. So, so with that, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. Good. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There we go. Adjourned.
Yes, it is.